Okay.
Oh, you're recording this, are you?
Yes.
All right then. I'll have to watch my P's and Q's. I'll behave myself. Sort of.
Okay. How much light do we have? Because this, I don't have light on one side.
You just have to shift yourself around. You know what I mean?
Okay. We were trying to keep the phone on the wall, but it's okay. This is.
Lindy, I like your profile picture. Hey, Andre. Christian. How are you guys?
Broadcasting over there. So Mr. Coleman is the first guest.
Yes.
What in the world was that? Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Oh, yes, it's me. I finally made it. Oh, how the heck are y'all? Oh, good to hear it.
Well, we are fantastically thrilled that you are with us this afternoon, and welcome to your first appearance at JemCon with us. We are glad that you're here. Fantastic that you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me over to play, Raven. This is a blast.
And for everyone, I just like to share that as an introduction of Mr. Townsend Coleman, he is the speaking voice of Riot. He has been doing voiceover work for a number of years now, and he also had done some on-air promos, some comedy promos for late night comedy shows, and he has been doing voiceover work to make his mark in the voiceover artist industry. He was voiced Where's Wally? He is famous for his work on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV show.
All right, cowabunga, dudes.
He was also another of my personal favorites, the Tick.
I am the Tick. And don't count your weasels before they pop, dink.
And as I mentioned, he is famously joining us today as the voice of Riot, the speaking voice of Riot.
Good evening. I am Riot.
So having given that introduction, I have the first question for you. Mm-hmm. Given the variety of areas where you've done voiceover work, how did you come across the opportunity with Jem, and what did you first think of the show and your character?
Well, before I did Riot, I had actually done a number of episodes of Jem over since 85 and 86 in there. And because I had worked with Wally Burr on the show, when it came around that they were bringing Riot in that third season, Wally basically approached me. I don't recall them having a wide audition process for this character. I think just having worked with Wally prior to that he asked me if I would read for it, and I said, well, of course, and then before I knew it, there I had this regular character. Prior to that, it was just incidental characters that I had done, nothing, no great shakes. but then he sort of tossed Riot my way, and that's how that was born for me.
Can you tell us what you remember about a typical recording day?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, you know, it's pretty typical, and it's even still this way. But back in those days, the number of actors that were here in Hollywood who were actually doing animation at the time was very small. It was a very small community, a very small kind of tight knit group, and so almost any show that I've worked on before has been very similar because voice actors, at least in my estimation, are some of the most down to earth, real. When it comes to actors, you know, the on camera actors tend to be a little more uppity and stuck up. Just again, my personal impression. I'm not saying they're all like that, but I came out here from Cleveland, Ohio in 1984 to be an on camera actor, and I did a couple of small things on camera. And just found that I really just hated the process. I didn't like the audition process of it. I didn't like the casting people. I didn't like the jobs once I got them. They were slow and boring. And frankly, a lot of the other actors that I worked with were very they kept to themselves and really had an attitude. It was just very kind of dog eat dog. Conversely, in voiceover, I found that the other actors were just down to earth, real people, and kind of didn't have that ego thing going on so much. So that's what really drew me to the animation world. So you ask what those sessions were like. They were always, it was like we were all brothers and sisters. We were all comrades. And I got to tell you, many of the voice actors that I've worked with over the years are some of the most talented and facile and hilarious people I've ever met in my life. And so these sessions tend to be pretty raucous and and pretty riotous, if I can say so. But yeah, they're just a lot of fun. You know, we're always bantering and you know, people are kind of always on. So it's a blast.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you were you in contact with any of the other voice actors outside of the project, or was it just in project camaraderie that you just described?
Well, back in those days, yeah, you know, Kathy Ann Bloor and I had worked, and God rest her soul, she and I had worked together because her dad was Chuck Bloor was a very well-known radio advertising creative guy, and so when I first moved to town, this was one of my very first gigs that I got when I came to LA. He was doing a TV commercial for a local radio station called KMET, and KMET had a mascot that was a chicken, and so I auditioned for this TV commercial and got the part of the chicken. So I actually had to wear this big chicken suit and, you know, walk through the set and, you know, do my kind of clucking walking thing. And Kathy Ann Bloor, whose dad was creating this commercial, was also in that spot. So that's where I met Kathy Ann. And so then when I got Jem and worked with her on Jem, it was like old home week because I had known her from working with her and her dad. So yeah, so her but then years later, it's like now I keep in touch with Michael Sheehan. Yeah, because I've been doing a lot of stage acting. Got back into theater back about 10 years ago. And Michael is a well-regarded theater reviewer here in town. And so he came and saw a number of the shows that I did and reviewed them and stuff. So we've kept in touch. So it's great, you know, seeing him every so often. I see him sometimes at screenings at the Screen Actors Guild. But then also Samantha Paris, who you might remember as Bobby Block from years ago. Sam has been up in Sausalito in the Bay Area for, gosh, probably 30 plus years now. And she has a school up there, a voiceover school called Voice Tracks. And so I'm one of the guest directors up there. I've been directing for her for about, oh gosh, I want to say again about 8 or 10 years maybe. I teach for her a couple of times a year. And now, of course, all those workshops are all done on Zoom, kind of like this. So yeah, those are really the ones that I have kept in touch with since then. Oh, sorry, can't hear you.
Yes.
Oh,
It's so ironic almost that one of the people that you've kept in contact with as another voice actor is Michael Sheehan, which is actually the voice of Rio.
Right, of course. Yeah. Yeah, and
I
we
think
actually
that's
and we actually
absolutely fantastic.
yeah, and we actually get along.
Now, you've shared that you voiced several characters on the Gem series, and then Riot became a permanent fixture for you.
Mhm.
As this was a cartoon in that day, did your children watch? Did you watch the final product? You know, how do you remember that part of your experience with Gem?
Yeah, well, back in those days, and again, you got to remember that this is before we had, computers and all that kind of stuff. So I had, VHS tapes, and I would record the show off the air. And so, yes, I watched it. My kids would often watch me, or my two older kids at the time, who were sort of into cartoons, would watch my shows with me. So if an episode of Ninja Turtles came on, or an episode of well, this would have been later, but back in the 80s, late 80s, when Gem was on, let me see, I was Scott on Teen Wolf, the Teen Wolf. I was doing Gobo on Fraggle Rock in those days. So yeah, I'd record them, and because I had them on the TV, my kids would, gather around and watch them too. And they'd say, "Dad, that's you?" And I go, "Yeah, that's me." "Wow, that's weird. It doesn't look like you." Well, that's how cartoons work.
Do you have a favorite Gem episode of the ones that you were either in as Riot or in as other characters?
Yeah, I don't know that I call it my favorite, but I guess it would be was one called Riot's Hope, where yeah, well, I guess I don't need to explain that to any of you guys. I was just gonna say, so this is the episode where, but and you guys are all like, we know, yes, okay, fine. But yeah, I liked that episode because I felt like it gave me a chance to give Riot a little more humanness. He was such a stuck-up jerk, and he was a lot like the on-camera actors that I didn't like. So yeah, that episode gave me an opportunity to show a little heart, and make up with my dad and care about my mom. And so yeah, so that's the one that kind of jumps out at me as being a particular favorite of mine, for sure.
I wanted to ask you next, what did you love about being the character Riot? But does that anchor in what you just shared, or would there be another consideration that you'd like to offer for that?
Yeah, well, so it would actually be the opposite of what I just said, because Riot was so stuck up and was so conceited and such a jerk in that sense. I thought it was fun to play, because I tend not to be like that in my own life, so, and I don't like people who are like that. So it gave me an opportunity to kind of try on a different pair of pants, if you will. It just it felt different. I thought, well, I'm an actor, just go for it, and be that jerk. Listen, I remember the way Wally Burr used to direct was very interesting, because he would often give what we call line readings. So if I gave a reading and he didn't like it, he would basically say, "Do it like this," and then he'd get real close to his talkback mic and he'd start doing it, and I just had to mimic him. And he always wanted me to get right on the microphone like this and just be Riot, be that stuck up jerk that you don't want to be, you know. And I would get like right close to the microphone and, oh, Jerica, you don't understand how much I love you. You know, that, I mean, that kind of, you are going to be mine one day. It's like, okay, not the way I would typically talk, but I could do that. Yeah, if that's what you want. And he's going to be a jerk. I'll be a handsome jerk. Yes, I will. See, let me see. He said, I had a couple of lines here that I pulled off of some of his stuff. He says, oh, here he's lying by a pool. And I don't remember what episode it was, but he says, a man as perfect as myself cannot tolerate even the slightest imperfection in his possession. And then he's called an egotistical snob. And he says, we are what we are. It's like, okay. And at one point he was this line too. And there was that one episode where he and I think it was Jem, they were getting out of a limo and going to a cruise ship, and they get out and she goes, what is that? he goes, it's a boat. And when I saw what that line was, and for that episode, I nearly fell off my legs because I thought he's either being facetious or he's just being stupid, you know. But yeah, and if you listen to that line the way I did it, because I've heard it back, and every time I hear it, I can hear myself like starting to laugh at the very end of the line, at the end of the word boat. Like I'm going, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. It's like, it's a boat. Like they cut off my laugh or something. But yeah, but there's this episode where he's saying to Jerica about Rio. He's dissing Rio yet again. And he says, nonsense. He's just insensitive. That's all. I, on the other hand, am always interested in what a woman feels. Yes. It's like a creamy cheesecake or something. Anyway, I'm going off. I'm getting way off track, I'm sure.
We love it. I wish can you see all of the responses for the people who are virtually joining us? They're like fanning and waving.
Oh no, on my screen, I just see like three people besides you.
Okay.
And and so that's all I see. I wish I could see you all. It'd be a blast to be there in person. Shucks.
Wow. Well, have you ever had anyone recognize you from your voice, or have you ever been with a person who said, hey, I'm with Riot from Jem. Can we get in our reservation early, or someone take advantage of your fame in that way?
Right, playing the Riot card, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I've never really had anybody recognize me from my voice, because my normal speaking voice, like this, doesn't really sound like most of the characters I've done. The closest my real voice comes to any of the characters I've done was when I did Scott on Teen Wolf. He just sort of sounded like this, but maybe a little bit younger. It's like, oh, boof, come on. Or when I was Waldo on Where's Waldo, it was just me, but a little higher, hi, I'm Waldo. This is my dog Woof, but no, I don't have that kind of really distinctive voice that people would recognize just by hearing it. But if somebody asks me what I do, and I tell them I'm a voice actor, and they go, oh, really? Have I heard anything you've done? And I will go, well, yeah, probably, because if it wasn't a cartoon you watch, Ninja Turtles or The Tick or Jem or whatever, you probably heard me a million times from 1993 until 2009. If you ever watched NBC at all, I was the comedy voice of NBC. So that whole must-see TV comedy block, when I did the very first must-see TV campaign, back in 1993, and then they kept me for 16 years. So I voiced all those promos: Seinfeld, Frasier, Friends, Mad About You. I launched Friends in 1995, and all the way up through 30 Rock and The Office. So yeah, so I voiced all those promos, and I was also the voice on the Tonight Show promos for Jay Leno every night for 16 years. So when they say, "Have I heard anything you've done?" I just, I sort of smile and say, "Yeah, probably," but they wouldn't recognize me from my voice. I remember one time I was in Toys R Us buying that big tick, talking tick doll that I've got back there, the big blue guy. I was in Toys R Us buying a couple of those at one point, and I was in line checking out, and the people in front of me were also buying that same talking tick doll, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, do I say something to them or not?" And then I thought, "What the heck? I'm gonna," So I said, "Do you guys are you fans of that? Do you watch that show?" And they go, "Oh my God, it's our favorite show. We love it, love it, love it, love it." And they went off on it. And I said, "Oh, that's cool. Well, I happen to be the voice of the tick." And then they just like stopped dead and they looked at me like they couldn't quite, it didn't register what I was saying. And they said, "Wait, when we watch the cartoon, that's your voice?" I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Do it, do the voice." Well, here I'm in the checkout line at Toys R Us, and I'm going, "Do I do it?" So I did it. I said, "I am the tick. I am mighty." Now you might be wondering, how does one prove one's mightiness or whatever? He goes off on these weird rants, and they just flipped out when so they wanted me to. So I actually signed the box of their talking tick doll. So that was kind of fun, but I don't have many opportunities like that, again, because I don't have that voice that people would just say, "Oh gosh, you sound familiar. What's that from?"
Pardon the momentary delays between the
Yeah,
questions.
no,
We'll
I get
take
it. You're trying to,
adjustments.
you're trying to keep that feedback down, right?
Yes, that is
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
For all of the ways that you are different from the character Riot, do you have any favorite lines that you delivered for him? Something that just resonated with you, like what is your favorite line that Riot spoke? Was that about the boat?
As silly as it is, that's the one that sticks with me the most. I mean, Riot, of course, didn't have a catchphrase as such, like Michelangelo had cowabunga and the tick had spoon, but that line for "it's a boat" is just always sticks out for me, like that's the most ridiculous thing he ever said, I think. "It's a boat." Yeah, really? He's like, "No shit, Sherlock."
With him being as different as he was from your other characters, do you feel like Riot had an impact on the work that you did moving forward from him?
An impact on the work I did moving forward? No, not directly. No, but because of some of the folks that I met working on the show, and kept in touch with over the years, people like Sam and Michael and stuff. Yeah, it led to other things for me. But as far as having an impact on my work, not really. Because it's like when I go to a Comic-Con for the Turtles, for instance. People will say, "What was it like when you auditioned or when you did that show?" Well, to be honest, there really wasn't anything different about that show than virtually any other show that I did, because the audition process is almost always the same. So my work on Gem was really, and I don't mean to, please understand when I say this, because it's not belittling at all. It was just another job, at the time, because nothing lasts forever. And I didn't know how many episodes of Gem I'd end up doing when I got the part of Riot. And so I didn't know if he'd last 2 episodes or, 60 episodes. And it's the same with all the shows, you know, that I got. When we first did Fraggle Rock, we were promised 2 years on NBC, and for the animated version, which is what I did Gobo for, and we ended up only doing, you know, 1 season. So because we know that in this business, you've always got to keep auditioning and keep working and getting new jobs. You know, your mind is on singularly the job that you're doing at the moment while you're there. But then once you leave the studio, you know, typically people will toss their scripts and that's it. And it's on to the next thing. It's on to the next studio. And you know, and so I can't say that the work on Gem actually, you know, necessarily led to anything else, but he kept me in touch with Wally Burr, you know, until he passed away, of course. Unfortunately, did a couple of cons with him, and it was great to see him, you know, in the later years. Yeah, so there's that.
Okay. If you could have a sit-down conversation with Riot, what kind of things would you talk to him about?
I'd say, boy, you need to grow up. If I had a serious conversation with him, I'd talk to him about his arrogance. Really, you know, I would say, listen, you know, everybody gets up in the morning and everybody takes a dump. You know, there's nothing special about you boys. So you got great talent, and you know you should use it, but use it for good. And you know, don't be such a player the way you are. But that's just me. You know, my real life, I'd probably, you know, give him a good talking to like that. And then I'd also say great hair. If you're talking, I'm not hearing you.
I am so excited. I just jumped right into it.
There you
I
go.
wanted to share that at this point, we're going to entertain some questions from the audience.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're going to see a couple of virtual attendees questions, and then we're
Okay.
going to move to the live participants here for their questions. And I see
Great.
one hand raised. Christian, if you'll come off mute and ask your question.
So, where would you see Riot as being now, all these years after the show?
Boy, great question. I think I want to say, just because I'm an optimist, that I see Riot having changed his ways and having toned his arrogance down, and I could actually see him settling down. I think let's say he and Jem finally hooked up and got married and had a boatload of kids, and then they got grandkids. And Riot, he's now shaved all his hair off, because that bald look is the way to go. He started losing it in front, and he didn't like that. He didn't like that look, so he just shaved it all off. And he's the one that commands the remote at home.
Hey. Thanks.
Okay. So we're going we'll have another virtual attendee question. This is
Okay.
Christian Ashler, whereas the first Christian was Christian Wright. So this is Christian Ashler with his
Okay.
question for Riot.
All right. Bunch of
Hi.
Christians there. That's good to
Yeah.
hear.
It's first of all, thank you for doing this. Secondly, my question is, you've said that Riot's arrogance is something that you didn't really care for, and I think Raven sort of touched on this. But what were some of the characteristics of Riot that you found were endearing to him? Because that, like you said, Riot's Hope was a marked episode for him. There had to be things about Riot that you enjoyed, or you wouldn't have voiced the character for as long as you did.
Well, Christian, that's actually not true, because a job's a job. And
Right.
so if it was a character that I wasn't caring for much, I would still do it, you know, because I needed the work. But no, you're right. There were characteristics of Riot that I did like. And again, I'll go back to Riot's Hope, where it showed more of his humanness. You know, he exposed his heart, where it seems that, you know, up to that point, everything about Riot, you know, was about Riot. And he didn't really, you know, it was always about Riot first. And he had, you know, such a high opinion of himself. And he tended to put others down. I could almost see Riot as an ex-president. But okay, yeah. So it didn't occur to me until just now, but there's a lot of similarities there.
Okay.
But so the flip side to that, of course, is, you know, when he was able to sort of push through that and allow himself to be vulnerable and open up a little bit. Those were the qualities that I did like, because honestly, I mean, that's just more the way I am just in real life. So it's easier for me to play because it comes from a real place inside of me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does.
Thanks, Christian.
We have 2 more questions from our virtual audience.
Okay.
Grace, if you will take yourself off mute and tell us where you're zooming from and give us your question.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can. And Grace, I see that you've got a high five up there for me. So let me give you a high five. There you go.
High five. So first of all, Townsend, welcome to JemCon. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me over to play.
So I'm zooming in from Virginia in the United States.
Great.
So not quite Minneapolis, but it'll have to do.
Okay.
But so Townsend, what I was wondering is, I know that you said that like Gem was like just a job for you in general, but did you have like a favorite character from the show, and was it Riot? And if it wasn't Riot, who was it?
Wow. Yeah, you know what, honestly, I didn't have a favorite character. I think, and this is going to sound like Riot, I think my favorite character was me.
Yes.
Just because, you know, he was the one that I, you know, that I felt like I birthed, if you will, you know, or gave birth to. So yeah, when we were recording the show, but I have to tell you too, again, getting back to the comments I was making earlier about doing these sessions and being with the other actors in the studio, you know, it's always fascinating to me to watch other actors' processes and how they work the mic and how they move in the studio. And, you know, because everybody has a different way of working behind the mic in animation. And so it's always fascinating to me to watch those, but always interesting to me too, because that's where you see a lot of their actual real personality come out as they try and inject that into whatever character they're doing. So, you know, I remember being really taken with Sue Blue, for instance. And you know, Susie, of course, and I go way back because she ended up directing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for almost 200 episodes. So we worked together a lot, and I worked as she voice directed The Tick, and Susie voice directed more cartoons that I did than any other director, more than Andrea Romano for me. And this is just me personally, but more than Andrea Romano, more than Ginny McSwain, more than anybody. So I worked with Susie probably more than anybody in this business. And, you know, so she holds such a dear place in my heart. Oh my goodness. And I understand that didn't she do your JemCon last year? Was it last year or something? Yeah. Okay. And, you know, I haven't seen Sue in a couple of years now, but the Women in Animation actually did a tribute to her. I'm just guessing here, but about 5 years ago, maybe. And so I went to that when they recorded that and honored her with that. And it was fascinating to see her career retrospective and her former on-camera stuff and then all her voiceover stuff and her animation stuff as an actress before she got into directing. And Ninja Turtles was her first directing job. So for me personally, having worked with her as an actor, and then when I got Ninja Turtles and turned out she was going to be the director on it after that first 5-part miniseries, everybody who knew her in our business was just cheering her on because we had never seen that happen before, where one of our compadres, if you will, another voice actor actually stepped up and sort of not transfer, what am I saying? Like graduated, if you will, to the other side of the glass. And she's now a director. So it was like, wow, this is crazy cool. You know, we were working on this side of the glass before, and now you're there and I'm here and you're telling me what to do. Shut up. You know, so yeah, so I don't even remember what your question was, but I hope I touched on something that was close to an answer.
That was the answer enough. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
wonderful.
Hey,
And for
Townsend,
our
I've got
last
a question for you.
virtual question, okay, a little bit of feedback there when we're talking about it. But for our last virtual attendee question, we have Jem with Aja's profile there. If you want to come off of mute, tell us where you're from and present your question.
Yeah, so my name is actually Jem. That's the name I was born with, funnily enough.
Wow.
But good coincidence. But I'm zooming in from the United Kingdom. And my question is, obviously the show was cancelled kind of midway through season 3. And I just wanted to know your kind of opinion on how that was for you. So obviously, like, was it abrupt? Was it quite, you know, sad, like disappointing to be kind of halfway through this really interesting storyline, and what you would have liked to kind of continue on from there, if you had any ideas?
Yeah, boy, what a great question. And thanks for calling in, thanks for connecting from the UK. It's got to be your bedtime. Yes, I was disappointed. You know, first of all, it's always disappointing whenever a show that you're doing gets canceled. You want to think that it'll run forever like The Simpsons, but you know, but they never do, you know, and you never know whether it's going to go 1 season or 10 seasons. When we started Ninja Turtles, you know, we all thought that the concept was a little weird, you know, and so we didn't know if it would have legs or not. Now look at it. I remember when I was doing, I played Sentinel Prime on Transformers Animated, and that was, he was actually quite a bit of a jerk, not unlike Riot, and at the end of whatever season it was, I think it was maybe season 3. I think it was season 3 that I was doing Sentinel Prime mostly, but right at the very end of that season, he was about to become Sentinel Magnus in the first episode of the next season, which would have like catapulted Sentinel Prime, now Sentinel Magnus, you know, into these great storylines, and I would have been in, you know, probably most of the episodes and everything. So I was really looking forward to that, and they canceled it. So it was like such a bummer. It's like, no, dude, I want to play that character. I want to keep going. And it was the same with Riot. So when they canceled Jem, you know, sort of halfway through season 3, and it felt like Riot was just getting going, you know, he wanted to say, you can't cancel me now. I'm too perfect. I have to defend my perfection. You don't understand, you know, it's like whatever, you know, wherever they were going to go with Riot, I wanted to keep saying, I am Riot. And they didn't let me. So it was a bummer. Yeah, great question, but thanks.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so much.
Thank you so much. And at this time, we would like to entertain some questions from our live audience members.
Okay, hold on just a sec. Somebody just held up a note to their camera. It said, we need a warning. What is that? We need a...
Oh, I understand now. They were saying that please let us know when you're going to represent Riot so that we can prepare our hearts.
Exactly.
Hey,
I wasn't
me
ready.
too. Yeah, me too. Me too. It's like it's too early. He was so young.
So hot.
Oh, he still had so much life to live.
Into the audience questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you come.
I'll grab the camera. I'll go on the fly.
Okay, here we go.
Hey Townsend, it's me again.
Hey.
We're gonna come over this way, and we'll do the questions back here and avoid the feedback, or sort of avoid the feedback.
Okay.
Anybody has a question for you, and join me back here. You have a question? I do. Okay, ask your question. Tell us who you are.
Well, hi there, Townsend. My name is Nicholas. I'm actually probably one of the world's biggest Riot fans. So much so, I actually have a tattoo on my arm that is German that says "Wer sind, wer wir sind," which means, of course, we are who we are.
Right.
And he has to be in the middle because Riot means everything to me. But
Do you have a picture? Do you have a picture of Riot on that tattoo?
No, I wish, but that's going to be at some point.
Okay.
So the question that I had for you is that Riot has been such a positive influence in my life, even given his arrogance and whatnot. But how did you come up with the personality and the voice to breathe life into him? Like, what were your thoughts and whatnot coming along to actually give life to Riot?
What great question, man. What's your name again?
Nicholas.
Nicholas. All right. Yeah, when you get a new character on a cartoon show, you see a picture of what he looks like, which informs a lot of your decision. But of course, it's the description of the character that the writers give you, and then it's the lines themselves that the writer gives you that will really inform what this character's characteristics are like. So when you first start a cartoon, oftentimes that first episode or two, you're still looking for the character. You're still trying to find that essence of who he is, and sort of why he's there, and what he's up to, and who he likes and who he doesn't like, and all that stuff. And so it's difficult to flesh all that stuff out in the first episode, or even the second or third episode. So over the course, oftentimes if you watch the first episode and then you see the progression of the character's personality over the course of the show, as an actor, it's almost the same as when you watch it and you go, oh, I see where he's going. He's becoming this. Well, as an actor, you get it in your mind based on the lines that they're giving you to read and the scenes that you've got. You go, oh, I see where they're going with this guy. He's this. Oh, I get it. So he's really stuck up. So all he wants is, he just knows that he's perfection. And he's, and again, I think I mentioned earlier that working with Wally Burr, Wally gives you line reading. So if he didn't like the first line that you gave him, or the second line that you gave him, he'll just come right in and say, no, do it this way. And he'll read the line himself and expect you to mimic it. So that's not a great way of directing, in my opinion, just because it takes a lot of the creative choices away from the actor, because now all I'm doing is being a mimic and I'm just doing it like him. So the first couple episodes, I remember I was sort of fighting that in my brain every time he would do that, because I think, well, that's actually not the way I would do it, but okay, if that's what you want to hear, you're the boss, so here you go. I'll do it like that. And, and he'd always, sometimes he would come into the studio, he'd leave the control room, walk into the studio and like almost position an actor, say, no, do it like this. I want you to do, and because he was an actor himself, he played my dad, in the show. And so he had it in his mind that, no, I want it this way. I'm going to show you how to do it. And I expect you to do it this way. And, and so he was an interesting sort of guy to work with. He's a great guy, but as a director, he had a very different way of directing that made it sometimes challenging to do. So, but I hope that touched on your question. It's just through the course of the show, you sort of you get a sense of what this guy is becoming, and then you try and take on those characteristics as much as you can.
Well, I want to thank you for voicing one of the most important men in my life, other than my husband. And you
There you go.
literally just made, with the way that you created Riot, the way that you perceived him, it definitely has helped me with my confidence and has helped me be a more confident person and just be a better person, even though he was an arrogant dick at times. But thank you so much for being you and voicing it.
Well, dude, thank you so much for saying that. And my pleasure. And let me just say something really briefly, because, you know, back when we were doing the show, we had no idea what sort of impact the show itself or any of our characters might have on kids who are watching it. And it wasn't until years later, I mean, literally until, you know, because we occasionally get fan mail that would be sent to the producers, and sometimes they'd bring it in and show us. But really it wasn't until the advent of the internet and then really these Comic-Cons that I started meeting fans and hearing these stories exactly like yours, saying, you know what Riot taught me was he gave me confidence. And it's like, wow, it never occurred to me when I was doing the show that words that I was just taking off the page and recording into a microphone might someday have some sort of true impact on another human being. So I love hearing those stories, and I'm thrilled that something that I had such a small part in would actually have an impact on a life. So bless you, man. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Before we go, I think I have a question for you, Townsend.
Yes, who's talking? I can't see.
Erica, I'm the one with the gem and the red bow in her hair. It's sparkly.
Okay. Looking for you. You're on Zoom, right?
Yes, I am. You can hear me, right?
Oh, I see you. I was looking for a real person. Sorry.
Yeah. You still sound like Riot after all these years. Do you know, like, if any of the other actors who auditioned for Riot, do you know who any of them would have been?
I don't. No, I'm sorry. I don't. You know, I remember Wally Burr was so busy in those days, casting and recording cartoons. You know, I remember the first time I auditioned for him was for Muppet Babies, and as the voice of Baby Kermit. And that's the first time I met Wally. But at the time, he was also directing Transformers, Generation 1, and Gem, and he just had so many shows going on. It was really kind of like a factory. I remember, you know, he was just sort of in and out. You know, he wanted the actors in and out, very efficient. So no, I never did find out who might have auditioned for Riot also. Although, as I was saying in the beginning, because I had done several other incidental characters on Gem, you know, for a couple of years earlier, before I got Riot, Wally knew me, and so he sort of knew what my range was and what my capabilities were. And I just remember him coming to me and saying, "Hey, I'd like you to read for this part." And so it felt to me almost like it was a personal thing, like he was giving me this part. That's my recollection. And you know what? Honestly, Erica, it was so long ago. I could be wrong about that. There may have been 50 other guys that auditioned for it too, and I just never knew it.
I've got a fun fact for you. Do you know who Mary Kay Bergman was?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Did you know that she auditioned for Rapture, Manx, Astral?
No.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
No.
on a website that was dedicated to her memory. It's since shut down. They used to have her little production notes on there, and I was surprised when I found out that she auditioned for Astral and Rapture and Minx. And I wrote it down somewhere, and I was like surprised because she did all the voices on Southward. She did all these voices, and I couldn't believe she auditioned for Gem too.
Yeah. Mary Kay was very prolific. She was very talented and did a lot of great work. You know, I remember back in those days seeing, oh, wow. And I don't remember whether somebody showed me this years later or whether I even might have seen it on the internet. Not sure, but audition notes, casting notes from Wally Burr and Wally Burr Studios. And I remember seeing there were the casting notes for Transformers, and all the people who auditioned for the various roles of Transformers, and then who actually got the part. And I remember being fascinated seeing, oh man, all those guys, auditioned for Optimus Prime and for Megatron. That's crazy. I didn't know that, So I just did a very small character on that show. It was only in a couple of episodes, but yeah, Wally Ray, it was like a factory, man, the way he cranked out that animation back then.
Thanks for that, Erica. We're going to do a lightning round. I know we're already over time, Townsend. I want to give you like 5 minutes more, if that's okay. We'll do a lightning round.
Listen,
4 questions.
Listen, I'm, John Henry, I'm in no hurry. So whatever you guys need,
Okay, we have other guests coming too, but I want to get through Takia and the 3 people we have in the room. So let's do that.
But I don't think those other guests are that important, are they?
Very true. Very true.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Who is this?
I have a question here.
I'm Allie. I just wanted to know if you had any opinions about the way the Riot Rio Jem love triangle played out.
I'm sorry. Say it again. If I had any opinion about that,
Yeah, or thoughts, or if it just was what it was, how they handled it, what you think should have done. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. I guess I hate to say this is boring, but I probably didn't really have a personal opinion about that. I just remember getting back to one of the other questions is that I was bummed when the show got canceled because I would have liked to have seen, how I would have liked to have seen more story arcs and where they, would have gone with Riot and Riot and Jem and Riot and Rio and Jem. Maybe they all got married and were all polyamorous and had a had a good old time. I don't know.
Can I?
Thank you.
Can I ask mine?
Okay, yeah, Takia, you're next. Okay.
Okay, hi. So you were my favorite Ninja Turtle, Michelangelo. Also.
All right, good answer, Dudette. Good answer. That was like bodacious, and you are one bodacious Dudette. Don't get me wrong.
Oh my, well, thank you. So the Ninja Turtles, they love their pizza. So my question is kind of a silly one, but do you have a favorite type of pizza? Do you like pepperoni or just regular cheese, or because I know Michelangelo especially loved his pizza.
Oh, Dudette, he loves his pizza. Pizza! Oh, pizza forever. Yeah, I got my favorite pizza. It's anchovy and hot fudge. Super easy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Takia.
Thanks.
We have Jacques in the back.
Yes, hi, I'm Jacques. I would like to know when you record, starting recording a session, do you have some kind of ritual or catchphrase to get into characters?
Yeah, well, it's easy. It's easy. Again, going back to a previous question, once you get to know the character and you can kind of flesh them out and you don't need somebody else's lines to really inform it for you because you've been doing it long enough now, what you kind of are him. Yeah, so for Michelangelo, of course, it would be Cowabunga! Whoa, dudes, this is like totally bodacious. So they're, lock into lines like that or the tick, I am, if I can get that register down. Arthur, I don't think this arrangement is working out. I think I need a new sidekick. Spoon. So yes, there are lines that I can lock into a character with, and that help. I remember when I was doing Gobo on Fraggle Rock, they already had the Muppet version of the show, and all we were doing was the animated version for NBC. And so it was the first voice match job I ever got because they weren't using the original voices from the Muppet version of Fraggle Rock. They were recasting them all, but they had to match the original voices. So I got the roles of Gobo, Architect, and Wrench on that series. And I remember this back when we still had Walkman cassette players, and I made some key lines for Gobo that when I was recording the series, I had a little pair of earbuds in, and with my Sony Walkman, I would play some lines of the original actor so that I could make sure I was matching it for tone and timbre, but not just the sound of it. You also had to be able to act the character as well. So at some point you got to start thinking like that character. You know, you like Gobo, oh, Wembley, your rock dust allergies all in your head. You know, we're going to go exploring in outer space with my uncle traveling Matt. You know, so yeah, so there were like key lines like that would lock me into the character, and I go, oh, okay, yeah, I remember who he was. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Okay, we have a special guest, Townsend.
Uh-oh.
Riot, it's Jen.
What?
It's Jen.
Sweetheart. Oh my goodness. Look who's here. If it isn't perfection herself. Jem, I only need to convince you that you are destined to be mine.
You had me at boat.
At boat, yeah, yes. It's a boat. Oh God, how are you? So great to see you. Yay.
You too. It's been a minute.
Yeah, like a lot of minutes, huh?
A lot of minutes. Yes. But in cartoon time, maybe that doesn't even mean anything, right?
That's right. That's right. It's like
Right.
it's like Wile E. Coyote. You know, he never actually dies.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Just keep going.
Yeah, I want to live in that cartoon world, don't you?
What?
I want to live in that cartoon world in
I do
real life,
too.
don't you?
I do. Let's do that.
So I understand you're a
Let's
guest.
just drive off in the Rock and Roadster, Riot. Let's just go.
That's right. That's right. I like the way this woman thinks. Oh, that's great.
I'm gonna turn it over next.
Okay, hon.
Okay.
All right, so
That was magical, by the way. Thank you. Yeah.
sorry. So Jen must have really chose you because she cut me off to get to you. Hi, my name is Shavana, and I just have one simple question. When I was in LA and I got to meet Michael Sheehan, he had absolutely no idea that this fandom base existed, and he never anticipated it. And to be honest with you, he had to bring his girlfriend back the second day in order to prove it, because he was like, they like me. No, really, they like me. And so when you got older and some of these shows were just a part of your past, like you said, a job, did you ever anticipate that there would be this many people, whether it's for Gem or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that really just connected and resonated and loves these? There are people who genuinely love these characters, and if
Yeah, I see that. Yes, no, thanks for the question. The simple answer is no, we had no idea. No, I had no idea that these characters were going to one day be characters that, 40-year-olds were going to be looking back on going, man, that character really had an impact on my life. Like I was saying before, we had no idea. And it wasn't until we started doing these Comic-Cons and actually meeting fans face to face that I was just flabbergasted at the number of people who were out there. I mean, I couldn't even imagine around the world, because of technology today, anybody can watch this stuff. That these characters that it was not to diminish it, but it was just another job for us. And, they hand you a script on the way into the recording session. You look through it, you circle your lines, and then you get into the studio, they test the mic, and you start recording. And that's it. So once the recording session's over and you give everybody a hug and you're off on your way to your next thing, it's now behind you and you don't really give it much thought anymore. Little did we realize that once we left the studio, that those lines that we just recorded were going to go get cut together into a show, and then it was going to be sent overseas so that they could animate to our voices, which is the way it works. We always do the voices first, and then they animate to it. And and then a year later, it ends up on TV somewhere. But by then you're on to something completely different, and you're working on whatever. So no, you just have no conception that these lines that I just read are someday going to be you know, we are what we are. You just don't know that, and you don't know that cowabunga is going to turn into something big, or spoon is going to turn into. You just don't know that. But then all these years later, to find out and to hear the stories, and I'll tell you, some of them have literally brought me to tears as I'm listening to a fan relate to me what this particular character meant to her because of yada yada yada. Donatello taught her that it was okay to be smart. It's like, wow, or Mikey really saved my life, or because my parents were splitting up and I was getting bullied in school, and it taught me how to laugh in even bad situations. It's like, golly, really? That's crazy. Good for you. Thank you for allowing me to be just a small part of this, and for telling me that story, because it makes it all so human for me.
Well, I want to say thank you from not only myself, but the entire fan base that we've been a part of for almost 15, 16 years now. And we appreciate you coming. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Oh, I wish I could see you all. I hear you out there, but yeah, just God bless each and every one of you, and thank you for being fans, because honestly, if it weren't for you guys, we wouldn't be working and having this great two-way conversation, even over Zoom. So really, really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
As our wrapping up sentiment, I would just like to share a short story with you and everyone about how I actually met Townsend Coleman.
Oh,
it was AwesomeCon of 2015, and I had been alerted that Riot was going to be there. I said, I am absolutely going to meet him and talk to him, and this is going to be fantastic for me, because at that time, I didn't know that Gem fandom was celebrated at this level. So he was the first behind the scenes Gem universe person that I ever spoke to. And for you to, it's a full circle moment for me, for you to be the first person that I spoke to behind the scenes at JemCon, and now actually here at JemCon as a virtual guest. So this, like Shavana was saying, thank you so much from the bottom of all of our hearts. We appreciate your time, and we just love the character, the work that you did, and we're grateful that you share your afternoon with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, Raven, thank you. Thank you, honey. Oh, listen, Raven, listen, I remember meeting you. And did you say that was at AwesomeCon?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I was in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Right,
absolutely. I lived there at that time.
And I remember meeting you, and we got a picture taken together, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we did.
Totally remember that. So thank you, and thank you for bringing that full circle here. And again, thank you, everyone. Really, seriously, you all have been just so kind to me, and I'm just nothing but grateful. So thanks.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to John Henry now for the next steps.
Okay.
Thanks, Townsend.
Thanks, John Henry.
I'll see you next time, okay?
Okay, are we off now?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay. Thank you, brother.
Love you.
Okay, love you too. Love all you guys. Thank you.
So for everyone on Zoom, we have our next special guest lined up. And everyone in the room, we have our next special guest lined up. Just give us a couple minutes to get reset. I see Rick is on the line. I think we'll do the same thing, right? Okay. So
John Henry, I can hang up now, right?
Yeah, you can hang up.
Okay. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, Rick, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you, John?
Good. Are you ready to get started in a couple minutes?
I'm ready to go whenever you need to.
Okay.
And if you feel like you want to pop up some of those storyboard pages at any point just to show art as we're talking about the process, feel free.
Okay. Do you think it's necessary?
No.
Okay. If it's not necessary, we might not. We have a kind of a bifurcated setup. I can't do it. I'm on a phone doing this, so I might not be able to show it. So you might have to talk about it. Or if you have them on your end and you want to share some, that's another option. But yeah, it's fine either way.
Okay.
Cool. So we're getting people in the room. What's that?
I'm getting a lot of voices. So
yeah, the people are just kind of like coming in the room and stuff. Just give us a sec. We'll get them calm down. Yeah, just we'll go on mute for a sec.
Okay, are we good to get started? No. Okay. So I'm feedback. I'm super excited just to introduce Rick Hoberg, who is a storyboard director on the Gem and the Holograms cartoon. This is his very first time appearing at JemCon, and I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple weeks ago at Terrificon in Connecticut. I happened to go to the show with a friend of mine, and I saw that he was on the guest list, and I scouted him out and started talking to him, and he said that he didn't remember working that much on Gem, but I said, according to his IMDb profile, he was a storyboard director for 40 episodes. So he probably had a lot more to talk about than he remembered. And I asked him if he was interested in coming to be a virtual guest, and he said he would love to be. So that was just a little background on how we got him to come here today and be a virtual speaker. And it's his first time working, or first time coming to JemCon, and he has a lot of great stories since he worked not only on the actual episodes, but he also worked on the music sequences as well, and has a lot of great connections with some fellow JemCon alumni. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John today.
Okay, we can get through this. Let's do this and see if it's any better.
Hey, Rick.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Okay, so yeah, Rick, you came in. I had a whole idea about what to do with you when we were going to talk about this topic, and you told me that my ideas were not the right ideas about what you do specifically. So yeah, just talk to me about the process. Talk to me about what you did on Gem. When the episodes you worked on were very important episodes. You came in around season 2, so just yeah, take it from there.
Well, first of all, I want to clear up something that the previous speaker was saying, because people are given misconceptions about this stuff. And is there something you can do about this lag in my audio? Am I doing something wrong here? Because I'm hearing myself speak. I can just start right.
I don't know what that would be. It may just be a product of the. Is it bad? Is it workable?
No, I can work with it. I just want you to know I may have to stop here and there to if. So.
Yeah, make sure, Rachel, make sure the thing is on mute up there. The Zoom is on mute on your end up there. I think. Maybe not. We're just adjusting so we don't have a lot of feedback.
Sure,
but
sure.
Okay. Just yeah, try to go. If it gets to be too much, let us know. Okay, Rick.
Okay. So what I was getting at is, because it was a union show that we were working on, we're going to do at least 4 or 5 episodes. At that point, the union required the maker of the cartoon, the studio, to put your name on all the episodes. So it was just a card that they would use every week at the end, even if you weren't working on that episode. So, and the other reason was, I started off initially working with Will Mineo. Him and I became good friends in the business. He liked working with me a lot. I liked working with him. He had similar sensibilities about the artwork and the way things should be done. So at this show, he had called me in because he needed somebody to help him with what you would call fixes, but quite often it was like trimming a show down when it was too long. And I would jump in and help him do those fixes. And initially that's always a difficult process for a director or producer. So he trusted me to do that, and I came in and worked on a number of episodes, and that's why it's hard for me to give you too much memory of this stuff for me, because I was doing bits and pieces here and there, or shortening or lengthening a sequence that he needed more time for, or he needed less time. And then it was after that I began doing sequences of my own, or the music video sequence. So this is basically part of the process of doing it.
That's awesome. So do you remember any specific things? I know I sent you some storyboards beforehand to kind of look at, but like around the process of getting things from the script onto what it's going to look like on the screen, and how you directed those things and what you did to punch them up or tighten them up, and the music video specifically. Tell us a little bit more about those things.
It's my recollection that Will was teaching a class here in a lot of ways, getting the people that he was working with to reflect his own sensibilities and how he wanted to do this show, because it had never been done before. This sort of, I don't know, you might call it a soap opera of sorts, and it certainly had never been done for American television and cartoons, but they were popular in the media at that point, things like Dynasty and Falcon Crest and Dallas. So this was something that he wanted to try to emulate. And a lot of that has to do with things that we would have stayed away from in the adventure cartoons, was that like just keeping a single face or something on camera, and sometimes very close in, because those could be deadly in animation. But he worked out so that he was getting really good work out of the Korean studio, I believe it was subcontracting from the Japanese studio that was doing this stuff. And there's one episode in particular, the one after the first two episodes. It was the third episode of season 2, and it was the episode where it was focusing on Kimber. And they have really started to get those close-ups really done beautifully, especially Kimber. There were a number of scenes where when I was watching it the other day, and I'm going, this is the sort of thing we never got right in most other shows. But they must have had a particular team working on Kimber, because she was, even in close-up, the other members of the band weren't as beautiful as she was in them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kimber did get a lot of extra attention, it seemed, always throughout the show.
I think she was like the sidekick, and she was like an important reflection of who Jem was. She was Jem's teenage girl personality, where Jem had to stay adult and serious to keep the band, doing what it was she needed them to do, basically.
Yeah, definitely. That episode may have been the one where the bands break up. Is that the one you're thinking about, where Kimber kind of goes off on her own with Stormer, and they kind of form their own band? Yeah.
I think it led up to that. That was the beginning of it, and then it led up to it in another episode or two. Again, here's the problem, is that I haven't seen these shows in years, so I'm just catching up on them. And in many cases, I was only working on one part of a show, and I would focus on that and kind of blot out everything else that was happening in the script. It was time constraints were amazing back then. Like these days, we would get, I don't know, 5-6 weeks to do the same amount of work we had to do in 2 weeks back then. So it was amazing the kind of drawing they were getting out of the storyboard artists, especially people like Debbie Pugh and Keith Tucker. And they were doing really solid, well-drawn things. It just had to take tons of time. I know, because I myself was producing. And I preferred getting away from this assistant thing that I was doing for Will, but he really needed somebody who could do this for him, that he could please work all the time. And that was something I could do for him all the time.
So you talk about cleaning up directional mistakes, as well as like kind of hooking up the individual artists who are doing the storyboards for the videos with the artists who are doing the storyboards for the show. You had to link all that work together. So tell us more about that process.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. Is, like I said, I was either adding on to sequences or shortening them time, because it all had to be timed out to what the timing director had said it had to be. And generally that was around 22, 23 minutes for an episode. So there were times when things were coming in short and I'd have to add on to them. especially easy to do with those music sequences because they were so artsy and there was so much going on that you didn't have to follow the direction exactly. But that was another problem that you'd have back in those days is there wasn't a lot of education on directing things, because directing in the case of these kinds of shows was like doing it for a good movie or even a good television show. And it wasn't any more of the old-fashioned coming in from stage right and stage left to like the old vaudevillian cartoons from Warner Brothers or Disney or something like that. It was more about sending your character in a certain direction to begin with, and generally that meant that the heroes were going left to right on screen, and the bad people, the villains, as so to speak, coming in right to left. So there would be a natural conflict set up for them in the head of the watcher or just visually. And then when somebody would like get something that the other person wanted, let's just say it's the bad guys got what they wanted for a moment, you turn them around and take them in the other direction, and the heroes would continue to follow them until you had the final conflict somewhere along the line. There's a number of these simple things that just had to be followed to make sure that it was a clear and enjoyable experience for the people watching it. A great sequence in the movie that I always go to would have been, nobody here is listening to this remembers probably Bullet, the Steve McQueen movie. There was a wonderful chase scene near the beginning of that, where he was chasing some guys in his Mustang through the streets of San Francisco, and it's very wild and chaotic, but they kept that direction right through the whole thing. And then years later, there was a movie called The Rock with Sean Connery, and I think it was Nick Cage might have been the lead in that, and there was a similar type of chase scene at the beginning of the movie, and it was just complete chaos. He wasn't paying any, and it was Michael Bay doing it, but he was probably either short on time or he was young at doing it, and he wasn't paying any attention to the right and left considerations. And sometimes that can be hard, especially in a driving sequence, in a chase scene, because when you have to cut inside to see close to people, you can't change the direction because somebody is sitting on the left-hand side driving and somebody's sitting on the right-hand side as the passenger. So the directional stuff has to be kind of put off to the side when you're cutting between two people who are supposed to be going in the same direction all the time. It has to go more to the point of view of the person listening to the other person talking. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I apologize, and I'm sure we'll be getting a minute or two here to talk about what the hell were you talking about? I didn't understand that at all, and that's okay.
Yeah, it sounds like there was some actual just things that are just kind of universal about how action should look on a screen that you were kind of taking care of, and that needed to happen because of the editing process and because of just the way that things make sense to people, story-wise.
Exactly. And many people were coming in from, like I said, an old school thinking of these type of shows. The first of those kind of shows would have been like Scooby-Doo and Super Friends and stuff like that. But even they were using old-timey storyboard guys, and they were not paying attention to that stuff. It's important to them because many of them came out of like comic book work and stuff, and you don't really think about that too much when you're drawing comic books because you just have to make that design of the page flow. So it's different, it's a real different composition going on between comics or that sort of thing and filmmaking.
Yeah, that's funny. The Scooby-Doo thing, like a lot of times the Scooby-Doo sequences, they would kind of move, when they're doing the montage of chasing the ghost or chasing the villain, they would kind of move back and forth across the screen, kind of some music playing in the background, go like this. How does that relate to like the Jem action as far as the Scooby-Doo montage sequence?
Well, that goes back to what I was saying, the old vaudeville stuff, because it refers to the stage itself. And that kind of staging, we're just going off and on one side or the other. And I'm sure that stage directors were thinking about this stuff because you see many good plays, you go, wow, I don't know why that's so much better than the one I saw last week. And it could be that exact thing. I've seen it on stage myself. I'm always great admirer of great staging, such as one of my favorites to see. I've seen them over and over again in Wagnerian operas on stage, and they're so elaborate and so there's so much detail of story in it. I know there's a lot of people who dislike them these days for various reasons, but it's amazing what it takes to do that. So, the Mikado is another one that is always amazing to me, how that comes together so well, but you probably get the top talent wanting to direct it.
That's awesome. The good example, I don't know those, but that's a good example. When you worked with Christy Marx, she's going to join us in a minute, and we're going to have a little bit of overlap, but she mentioned some of the key episodes that you worked on being A Father Should Be, which was the finale of the whole series, Change of Heart, The Stingers Hit Town, Brit Rock, K-Jam, and Talent Search, where they introduced 2 band members on each side. And so these are multi-episode arcs, and kind of connected to be continued episodes. Why is the stuff you do so important for those type of things, to the continuity and telling those stories?
Well, I think Will quite often would pick out stuff he wanted me to work on that had more of that kind of content. And so I think that's probably what would intrigue me working wise and stuff. And he knew I liked character work a lot. I wasn't particularly great at it, but in the sense that these kind of cartoon shows, it's hard to get a lot of emotion in the acting of that the animators were doing. So you really needed to do that. Yeah, the act, like previous guest, he's a great example of how you can get great character out of a character not doing a lot on screen, but emoting and doing some really great acting. That's made a lot of series, especially during the 90s. The Batman series comes up, and Jem does come up on that too. And that was earlier than Batman. A lot of this was being done in the head of the audience in a lot of ways. First time I saw it was Johnny Quest, the original show back in the early 60s. That's where, in fact, my mentor was Doug Wildey, who brought me in and taught me storyboard work. Such. And this I hadn't really paid any attention to till he brought it up to me that, sometimes we're working with a character who's not moving or doing much, so the actor has to save your rear end on this stuff. And when they're great actors, they take a lot of time.
Yeah, I guess in animation, the voice actors are very important. You kind of overlap with Townsend a little bit, but that acting to push through the animation and make the emotion stick there, the voice directing and the voice acting was probably key for you guys as well, right?
Oh yes, yeah, definitely. And we were quite often not as fortunate to have the dialogue recordings before the animators got them. It was really, those were tight deadlines we were working on back then. But you look back on Jem, as I have been for about a week now. I haven't gotten all the ones that I want to see, and you can see that artwork. I was always kind of amazed at what we were doing there, because I thought sure when he brought me in on it, it would be the kind of thing where they turn into superheroes or something after doing a show. And I'm going, no, wait a minute. This is all about them being who they are, and synergy, making their kind of the superpower they had, but that was becoming other people in the band, basically. Jem being a great example, her and Jerica.
Yeah, ultimately, Christy Marx talks about it kind of being wish fulfillment a lot for women, for girls, and it's a toy line. Ultimately, it's a commercial for a toy line that you're selling. So there's a lot of wish fulfillment involved, but that kind of superhero element is definitely part of it as well. When Christy and you and I connected over email, she referred to you as Ricola. Is that something she used to call you?
I think it was Ricola.
Ricola.
Yeah, it was just a term of endearment. We're all just friends, basically. But yeah, we had a fun time back in those days. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of parties going on, especially in my house. Jeez, I cleaned up after and things like that. In fact, we would do a lot of idea thrashing out at these sorts of get-togethers. And in recent time, I was fortunate enough to have a character that I co-created show up in a Marvel movie. The Jane Foster being Thor character was the one that I created for What If, my friend Don Bluth. And so we had talked with the editor at the time, Roy Thomas, about how it got created. And Don and I both had exactly the same memory. It was over a couple of pina coladas my wife had made. And this just came up and we ran with it. We actually went to the editor, who was sitting in another room of the house, and pitched it to him. And he went, yeah, let's do that. That's a great idea.
That's great. So there's an artistic element to these parties and having a little bit of inebriation, a little looseness in your mind, right?
Yeah, but it gets you away from the studio where that sort of thing can jam up. You know, when you're sitting with a bunch of people throwing ideas out, I don't think it's quite as creative. Let's say two people together talking something out and getting the ideas. Then you go to a group setting and you find more ideas being thrown around at them. So yes, that's why I think that we all had a wonderful time working on the show too. Although Don wasn't involved, worked with Christy and I at Marvel, Spider-Man is amazing.
Speaking of Christy, how novel was it to be working with a woman in this space versus with other men?
I think that was a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm one of those people who want to see different points of view all the time, and it was the industry was luckily needing talent so badly. You were getting a break fairly quickly in the industry, and that was a real neat thing to have happen. Because Christy, is a good example. She got a chance to come in on Spider-Man and she was like a story consultant on that. And by the time that Jem came along, Hasbro and Sunbow had been working with her, and they just loved her, and she became, I guess you would call the showrunner, head writer. And
yeah, she was
knowing her, it was just a fun time to be working with her.
Yeah, she was kind of the creator, but also story editor overall, and she was the top of the food chain for Jem, definitely.
Yeah. I was always amazed that she could write the scripts and be doing that stuff, because it's all just an amazing amount of work. You know, that's why I retired a couple of years ago. I had just gone, that's it, I'm done. You know? I make most of my living these days doing commission artwork and stuff like that.
Yeah, tell us about that. I went to your website. What's the website name again?
It's Rick Hoberg Story Artist, and it used to be just rickhoberg.com, but somebody stole my name when there was a switch over from one person hosting me to another setup hosting me. Somewhere along the line, there was a lag in keeping that name for me. So I quite often get somebody out there trying to sell me back my own name for $300-400. I'm going, yeah, the hell with that. So it's Rick Hoberg Story Artist, and it's a much better website now too. And I post it myself. And just love it. I just love working on it myself.
Yeah, if the people on the Zoom and people in the room, if you go to the website, you can see how beautiful the artwork that you do is. It's really amazing. A lot of Marvel stuff, right? Like
Marvel and Star Wars, because I was popular with both groups after I had worked on the Star Wars comic book for a short time. And at the beginning, the Lucasfilm asked me if I'd start doing some drawings for them for style guide stuff. And by the time that the reissue of the first 3 films came about, I was doing hundreds of drawings for them. So it only just ended in recent times. I think the last movie I worked on was Rogue One.
It's amazing. Yeah, you really should check it out. So if I wanted you to do a picture of me as a Marvel superhero with my head on those bodies, you would be able to do that for me?
Yeah. Generally, I don't do that sort of thing. I'm doing, just reproductions of the characters that I previously worked on. I have had a couple of them.
Maybe as a special for me.
Yeah, I can do that. I've been doing, there's one guy who has me doing stuff of the actors who played these characters on television or in the movie. And I did a Shazam for one of these guys recently, but it was the guy who played Shazam back in the 70s on the Saturday morning show. and I've done like Batman and Robin, but it's Burt Ward and Adam West. And it was, oh gosh, I can't think of his last name. The guy who originally played Captain America on TV. Reb, I'm sorry, but you guys, somebody there must know the name, you know. So yeah, I like doing those. And they come out pretty well most of the time.
It's Reb Brown, they're telling me. Reb Brown.
Reb Brown, there. Thank
Yeah.
you. Appreciate that.
The audience is on mute, but they know the
What
answers.
you get for interviewing a 70-year-old guy, you know.
So what I was looking at the storyboard for now, the music video with the Stingers and the Misfits and Jem all singing together, I found a version of it that was like a rough, it was called Roughs, and it was like the same 11 pages, but they were kind of just outlines.
Yeah,
and then
that's
there's
how you
another,
begin.
yeah, so that's, yeah, tell us about how those relate to and what gets done to those to make the final version, which I also found a version of that. But what do people like you do to the roughs to make them be final?
Either change them according to what the director wants, and or it gives the director a chance to look at stuff and know what he wants changed before too much other extra work goes into it. So at that point, somebody would be doing their week's worth of roughs, and then look at it and instruct me or whoever else was helping him at the time to do the corrections that he wanted, and then it would be sent back to the artist for finishing. And that is generally pretty, not a lot of corrections done when you're working with people you've worked with through the series at that time. But it can quite often happen to a newbie on a show. And these days, it's easy for them to do because we're all working in either Photoshop or Storyboard Pro. And that's another reason that it's just so tough to make a living at these days, because they actually want you to finish by having an animatic, we call it, which is actually a storyboard that's put on, it looks like it moves. And that's just a tremendous amount of work. That's why they give us 5 or 6 now instead of 2 or 3, because nobody can do those in 2 or 3 anymore.
Yeah, the roughs I saw were very close to what the final looked like, you know, as far as where the frames were, and it seemed like they had a flow and they were just kind of getting it approved. And it,
exactly.
The final version looked very much like the roughs did, except a lot more detail.
And with somebody like me, I just naturally have more of a finished look at my work. I just can't seem to give it up unless I know everybody is going to see exactly what I want them to see. So I have to go in and do facial expression stuff, which stuff you probably saw was just a circle for a head and lines for where the nose and the mouth might be, right? So you were depending on the storyboard that can go around to give you the emotion, what they want, where I felt I've got to get that in there. They're never going to understand what I want. They would, but it was my own ego saying that I needed it.
Yeah, some of us have that. Some of us are perfectionists or just a little bit of OCD that you want to make sure that your vision is saw.
Yeah, it's a bit of narcissism and
yeah.
Workaholism, you know.
Anybody online have any questions for Rick? Anything you want to ask? Feel free to raise your hand and come off mute if we call on you. And the same for in person. If you can think of your questions, and we'll come to the in-person people. And we can still talk a little more if there aren't any questions at this point. Does anyone have any questions for Rick?
Bueller?
We have some questions in the room, but we have this kind of feedback issue. So yeah, just come over here and ask a question.
Okay. Davide, thanks for coming here. We have proof that at least one song was cut after being completely produced, recorded, and fully storyboarded. That was for the episode Island of Deception, and the song is Love's Not Easy. Do you remember any case in which something as big as a full recorded and storyboarded song was cut?
Yeah, it could happen. The client that we were working with, Sunbow, was really in tune with what was doing and what was required. So there wouldn't have been too much of that, but it could have had something to do with something that they felt was moralistically a little I don't want to say it just wasn't acceptable to them. That would happen. That would have happened more in the days of the networks because they were always complaining about this show. Though it would have had to have something to do with the toy line, perhaps, or like I said, something that they just didn't want seen in the show, or that somebody actually might have had a better idea, and they had another song that they could drop in there. Because I suspect that because of the way those song sequences were done, you might have had a few that weren't even used in the show that had been created for the show, and that's just my opinion. I don't know that for a fact, but that would seem logical. Does that make sense?
It does. Davide, who was here asking that question, he actually kind of figured out a way to animate that storyboard that he found, and it's I looked at it when I was I looked at it when I was researching this panel. So he found the undone. It was from the first season before you started working on it,
right.
Rick. So that specific song, but he animated it, and it's kind of a beautiful thing. I wonder, as far as thematically, Jem in that video has a rifle that she kind of hits a pirate with. So maybe that was the thematic thing that they had a problem with, and the reason they cut it.
That could be, although Sunbow was the same people we were working with when we started doing, well, the whole thing got started because of G.I. Joe. And G.I. Joe actually gave us the very first opportunity we had since the 60s, and I wasn't around working during the 60s. But we could actually do what you consider real violent action, because we had never been allowed to throw punches and hit people, not even slap people, nothing like that. So by the time we did G.I. Joe, there was a lot of what you consider violent behavior going on. But if you're doing it in service to the story, it can be quite necessary to get the impact you need. So could be the fact that Jem was considered a girls' show, and they wanted to be cautious with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I heard something about She-Ra, which was a couple of years prior to Jem, and that because it was a female property, She-Ra had to kind of mesmerize people and do flips on the screen and jump backflips. It wasn't like she couldn't do anything like He-Man could do that was more actively, directly violent because of the female property.
Well, I as I recall, He-Man didn't have much violence in it. It was a lot of running around, but that's what they considered action back in that period, was people chasing each other, and things like that. So there wasn't a lot of actual physical conflict.
So we have a couple questions in the chat. Ellie, you want to come off mute and tell us where you are from and ask your question?
Hi, I'm from west coast of Florida, Tampa, and my question is, Rick, actually I have two questions, but I'm trying to pick one. All right, I've chosen my question. Who was your favorite character to draw, if you had a favorite character to draw?
Well, to be honest with you, I liked all of the holograms and Jem. They were really enjoyable to draw. There was I didn't really like drawing the what was it, the Misfits? Yeah, they were always too hard edged, and they were unpleasant to draw. They just were, where characters like Kimber and Jem and the girls in the always had really lovely outfits they had created for them and stuff like that, and they were always much more feminine. Fun for me to draw because I never got to draw much stuff like that. Where the Misfits were always hard edged and wearing bad girl stuff. So it was just that there was not one in particular it was fun to draw because it was a new property to me. So I didn't really understand really who they were until I started seeing the shows, and then I was going, oh, I get this more. Yeah.
Nice chuckle from the people in the room to that, by the way, about the
Misfits. Oh
yeah.
Yeah. Back in that day, they were like Pat Benatar as opposed to I don't know, Ladies from Fleetwood Mac or something like that.
Right. Miranda, I see you have your hand raised.
Hello. First of all, I just want to thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. It's always interesting to hear about the process from different people and different points of view. I was just, yeah, thank you so much. I was thumbing through your catalog of work, and it's beautiful, by the way, excellent artwork and amazing comic book work. And I was curious what the difference is in the process between working on cartoons and working on comic books. Is it a completely different ballgame, or are there things that cross over between the two?
The one thing that crosses over most, and one of the reasons I got into the business so easily, I slid in at a point when they, guys who could draw realistic things and draw with a reality that was nothing like the shows that I initially was seeing, such as the barbaric type stuff. But it was really fun to be able to draw both, because the difference for me is a thing of working in real time, as opposed, which is the filmmaking, as opposed to comic book work, which is in design. So you don't have to worry about changing direction on a character. And a great example for me would be one of those classic things where a character like Spider-Man, who you know is moving very quickly, is leaping across the panel, and he's saying 4 or 5 lines of dialogue as he does it. And in a film that would never work, because it would take way too much time. So it's the difference between time and design, in my estimation. And they found ways to make Spider-Man wonderfully filmed. He's just one of the best things that ever was created to be made to go on film. I always was amazed when they were making the film in the early 2000s. So that's the difference for me. But compositionally, you have an advantage if you've been drawing comic books, because you can always find a way to make a composition work. And in the old timey thinking of a lot of the cartoons that were being done, it was a lot of side to side stuff and straight on. So you see characters, you've all seen those characters in Scooby-Doo, where they run across the screen, or the background is panning behind them. But we were trying to introduce things like down shots and up shots on characters when there was something dramatic going on. And there was a lot of argument between like myself and other directors who've been around for a while, but they wouldn't think this stuff would read. I'm going, yeah, but Alfred Hitchcock has been doing this sort of thing for years, and it always pays off. One of his things that I always loved was his God shot. And the God shot would be something like, there's a great one in The Birds, where the town has been attacked by the birds, and you're seeing it from just close-ups of people who are in the middle. Then Hitchcock cuts to a down shot on the town, and you can see that the gas station's on fire. Things are people are in trouble over here, and it's all this chaos. And he just goes back up in the way, like what you would say is God not caring but watching. And then the birds start to circle in from outside camera and down toward the chaos. And that to me is just the best kind of storytelling. But we would call that a God shot, but it's an uncaring God. And it doesn't have to be your God. It could be Zeus or whoever, but that's what he would call it, basically. And shots are really great when you've got something really dramatic doing with a character, or they're saying something dramatic. It can be anything from an impactful line from a hero to his or her compatriot, or it can be a villain line to somebody. Those upshots are really, really fine for that sort of thing. So it took us a long time to get everybody to do it, but by the time the 90s came in, we really had that down, and you can catch it in the Batman TV show. And Jem had a bit of it, because they really used those extreme close-ups. And like I said, Kimber became something that obviously the animators loved her, because they really gave her all the sweetest animation, basically. So I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So where are you coming from, Miranda? We miss you.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to say that part. I'm in Kansas. Yeah, we miss you too. Couldn't make it in person this year, but
maybe next year.
So glad to have the virtual experience.
Yeah,
Exactly.
thanks for being part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Rick, I think it's something that the point that you're making is so great about the dramatic impact that kind of goes across vaudeville, cartoons, cinema, opera. I love that connection you're making. This kind of this universality of what makes things good and dramatic. Anything else you want to say on that point?
Well, I just think it's good to be fully educated if you're going to do these sorts of things for a living in all sorts of media, like not only your cartoons, but anything else that has to do with it. You know, any kind of movie making, especially that relates directly to what you're doing, and what sort of material you're working on. And you also should be involved, if you can, seeing an opera here and there. I don't, you know, I personally don't even have the money for it. It's so expensive. But it's a wonderful medium, and it's one of the most creative I can think of. But stage also is really great that way, to see people on stage live and what's going on and how things are created. That's really fun. And the tricks of filmmaking be among the most fun things to do. There's many times where we borrowed tricks from the old filmmakers that because they couldn't do something well, they would do it off stage instead. And it really works well. The offstage death of somebody or attacking somebody is always great. Somebody like walks off stage and the others look and they go, "Oh, the poor devil," you know. And it's the sort of thing your brain can do that a lot better than showing it on film. Those are the sorts of things I really like, are the old fashioned tricks that even Spielberg still uses them today because they're so fun and that they're a part of filmmaking that you really can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, something about the mother of invention, right? Kind of necessity and budget being kind of something you can be a little creative about, whether you do things on screen or not.
And you can find that a lot of times is in older films, 30s and 40s films, because the 30s and 40s are among the most inventive times in film. They've been making good films up to that point, but then it exploded into a medium that was being so many different things, and they'd have to find ways to sell them and make them look good without the money to do them or the ability to do them. I can tell you, one of the things that was most fun for me back in the day is I used to love dinosaurs. I still do. I think dinosaurs are just fascinating. And one of the first movies my dad ever sat me down to watch was King Kong. It was on like our local station in LA because I grew up in LA. And I'd been enjoying dinosaurs because there was little toys you could buy and stuff like that. My mom bought them for me. But seeing King Kong, I went, "Oh gosh, this is real. This is happening in real time and stuff." And so I became a fan of his work. I went and saw all of his films or watched them on television. And then I remember going to see Jurassic Park for the first time. And I literally overcome with emotion in that first scene where they see the Brachiosaurus feeding out of the tree and stuff. And I went, "Wow, they really did it." You know, amazing. They brought them to life and they're real. So those kind of things are really fun to experience in film.
Yeah, definitely. This technology goes further. New things you get to see things done newly, right, in a new way.
Right. Yeah.
As far as the differences between the videos and the storyboards for the script part of, you know, the words of the thing, how do those two processes differ as far as how you approach them artistically?
By video, you're talking about the final film?
More the music videos, like, so there'd be a song. Yeah, the song versus the story.
Well, with the videos, there was one in particular that I did that I was trying to find, and I just could not locate it. It was a sequence of 1940s dancing and most of the jitterbuggers and you know, because the jitterbug was the big deal during the swing days. And I did that because Will knew how much I loved swing music. And it was just really a total joy to work on. And I could go back and emulate a sequence in Disney's Make Mine Music. It was an old Fantasia-like offshoot that they did where they just took sequences of music and animated to them. But they had this whole sequence with jitterbug dancers, and it was stunningly great to draw. So these sorts of things, these videos, they can allow for a lot of artistry, and you don't have to follow a script. It's given music. I
Yeah,
remember
think
that one
that's-
standing
I
out.
think it's called Making It Happen is the one you're thinking of, probably. It having had that jitterbug vibe. Is that, yeah, that's, I'm getting some confirmation from the audience too. So
And that's in which episode is it in?
they're going back through time in that episode, right? Is that Journey Through Time? Yeah. Yeah, so they go back and they're in the 40s. They're like, they've gotten a time machine. The story makes zero sense. Like there are dinosaurs involved as well. So you definitely were involved in that one.
I'm gonna love it then, you know?
Yeah, Journey Through Time. They're in the Renaissance. They're in Victoria. They're in Vienna. For
And I just
Mozart.
didn't go far enough in watching them at this point because
Yeah.
I can only get 2 or 3 in here and there because it's just my life is more hectic these days than when I was working for a living. So
Yeah, you should check it out. I wish we could show
I
you
will.
on the
I'm gonna
screen.
see
We
it,
might
yeah.
be able to pull it up during Christy's when she joins. I wanted to ask you also just about things that have happened, you know, since you were doing this actively, like anything in the last few years or since the year 2000 that you've seen in animation that you think is just really cool or really interesting, the way they've chosen to do things in cartoons or animation since, you know, in the last 10 or 20 years.
the traditional and the computer generated CGI have both just gotten to where they're doing wonderful stuff. And I loved, like recently I saw the Sea Beast on Netflix, and man, what a great cartoon that was. It reminded me of How to Train Your Dragon and its 2 sequels. Those were just stunningly good cartoons. They felt like hand drawn, but they were obviously computer generated. And it's just really fun to see them being able to do that. And some of the shows I worked on in recent times, one was Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which came out just before the first Avengers film, and it was very faithful to the comic, but we had the technology to do backgrounds as 3D elements and let's say ships and things like that, flying things. But then they could render it with a line around it, and it looked hand drawn from the aspect of it just fit right in with the characters did. But you could move through it, and it actually would move like a real object. And that, I think, is a great step forward for 2D animation. Then you're getting the best of both worlds. And I do like simple 2D animation a lot. As I mentioned before, I think there's a real necessity to involve the audience, let them make it up in their own mind. That's the advantage comics has, is what happens between the panels. That's all made up in your head. You know, how Spidey got from here to the top of the building. I don't know how it happened, but I can make it up real easily. I think that's.
We fill in the blanks, right?
I'm sorry.
We fill in the blanks in that case, right?
Yes,
We're filling in the
exactly.
blanks ourselves. And
That's
if you
part
see
of the-
something
that's
like,
part of the collaboratory process with you and the audience.
yeah, definitely.
Well,
Like something with Bob's
wouldn't have-
Burgers, they're very
we wouldn't have
flat.
these
But
jobs.
yeah.
Yeah, we wouldn't have these jobs be doing this stuff if it wasn't for the fans and the audience and the people who want to watch this stuff, which quite often I'm.
So we have a question from Rachel in the room. I'm gonna.
Okay.
Hey, we were saying before we're working on the music videos, it sounded like you had some more creative flexibility and more creative freedom working on those compared to the actual episodes. Were there different teams that in general worked on the music videos versus the actual episode animation, if that makes sense, like the actual episode drawings?
I'm sure there were. Yeah, I'm sure there were, because there was a point after the second season where literally I told Will, I've got to work on it. And so I basically said, do you mind if I just do the videos, the music? And not a problem. And he just switched me over with a couple other people, and it worked out fine. But yes, those were really fun to do, and they took a lot less thinking out technically and more just having fun with images and things you could move from one sequence into the next, just artistic flow, so to speak.
I saw Amy had her hand raised online. If you still have a question, Amy, feel free to come off and ask it.
It wasn't so much a question, just as like a comment, because one, I love that you mentioned the birds in Hitchcock. Like, that was awesome.
Thank you.
But the other thing was talking about the off-screen deaths happening, like coming back. It also made me think about like ancient Greek drama, because they would do that. The deaths would sometimes happen off stage, and then you see the aftermath on stage. Like, this has happened, this tragedy has happened, and then they come back to the characters who are still alive, and like, how do they deal with that aftermath? And so that's what it made me think about. That's why I kind of raised my hand. So like, oh, he's mentioning that. I love it. So
yeah, the Deus Ex Machina. Yeah, the guy.
Yeah. You have the God, machine of the gods.
Like quite often somebody would fly off or be dragged off through the air.
Yes, like
people working behind the scenes who are running a machine, so they called it the God in the machine. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Like in Medea, after she does what she does, she flies off in a chariot that's brought to her by her like grandfather or something, but he's literally a god, and so she escapes after doing her dastardly deeds. And you see that and the deaths and everything off stage. It's really cool. But yeah, I like how even though that happened in ancient times, we still see some of that drama, the stage work and all of that. We still see it in the storyboards. We see it on Broadway. We see things like that still happening in present day and like still applying. I think that's
it applies to shows like Wicked and all of those kinds of plays that they're doing now. Yeah, it's
most definitely. So timeless stuff. Love it. Thank you so much for your work and your contributions. We appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you. A pleasure to be at something like this and talking to you all about it, because it's just great to know that Jem garnered such a following and continuing today. It's like I was one of the guys who helped them get X-Men off the ground, the X-Men, the animated series. And now here we are with it. It's such a hit again on Disney Plus that they're animating a whole new season or two, and it's going to start right where the old one ended. It's going to start in 1997 and move forward from there. And it's just, to me, that's just stunning. That's never happened. Yeah, 30 years later, a show's going to get its fourth season. That's just awesome to me.
Because the fans, like, when it comes back and people want it, it might take a while, but it will come back. So,
yep, I agree. Well, this is proof,
And hopefully, Jim, we will see some more. We will see though.
Well, the fans are having a lot of say in what's happening these days. They've made or broken a couple of big productions, and there's other times you just got to go, just hold your horses. We're getting to it.
Well, we will be patient, as long as it takes, as long as we know it's coming. So our
there's
time will
always
come.
something for somebody. I mean, for everybody these days. I'm just stunned right now after the first two episodes of The Rings of Power, because it's everything I thought it would be, and now I'm going, oh my God, this could be better than Lord of the Rings. It's so well done, and they're doing such great story. And it's the same, a lot of the same characters are in it because they're immortal characters, so it's just wonderful to watch, wonderful stuff. And it's nice to be a fan of that stuff my whole life, and they're totally getting it right.
That X-Men reboot is apparently using a lot of the same voice actors too, and a lot of like picking up where the story left off, but also using some of the same story people and the same voice actors. So that's what's so exciting for us as Jem fans, that could be possible for us.
Larry Houston is going to be a consultant on it. He was the main director and producer of the show, and he's there he's just becoming a star in the world of cartoons and animation right now. And it's just great to see they're bringing back all the people they can. They've lost a couple of them to deaths in recent times. Cyclops, I played Cyclops, passed away, and there's one or two others that have passed away as well. Really, like, you go, wow, we did get old here, but we still feel youthful. Like, who was the guy who was on just before me? I know him. I just can't think of it.
Townsend Coleman.
Yeah, Townsend. I mean, I'm looking at this guy going, God, he's got to be somewhere just south of me age-wise, but he's like he's a 20-year-old. This is amazing.
He's got that ageless spirit a lot of us have, right? You
Yeah.
feel like your body changes around you, but the mind is still very young and very free and youthful. So I think it's possible.
Oh, it is. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so our showrunner,
Fountain
Fountain of Youth. Yeah, just thinking young and being happy, finding your happiness and celebrating happiness is really important.
I think so.
So I think I wanted to see Christy Marx is on now, I believe. Christy, you want to say hey?
All right.
Hey, Rick. Hey there.
Hey, Christy, how are you, kiddo? Good to see you.
I'm above ground, and that's saying a lot these days.
Well, you're a busy girl. You're driving all over the place. What does it take you? 200 miles to get to the doctor's office or something?
Oh, God. Yeah, it's a 1-hour drive down a particularly treacherous mountain road. So.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah.
It's one of those roads where they're just continuously having head-on collisions for some reason, you know, bad drivers, distracted drivers, what have you, so.
we wanted to close out the session asking you a funny story about working with Will, or working with Keith, or working with Christy now that she's on. Do you have any funny stories about working with any of those folks from back in the day?
Well, we were always doing stuff, but you know, there really wasn't anything while we were working on Gem, because Gem was a bit of a grind for me, because I was working on other shows too at the same time. They had me working on Defenders of the Earth and other stuff, and I was freelancing outside just to make as much dough as I could at that particular time. So,
and we're also spread out. We're also far away from one another.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were all together in the same place either. We weren't working in a building together, and I was living way up in Wrightwood, which is a little ski resort town way up in the mountains. It took an hour and a half to get to LA from Wrightwood. So, you know, I was sort of a hermit up there in my mountain abode, and you know, a lot of you guys were down in LA, and somebody was back in New York, and writers were all over the place. And so it was a very scattered kind of an experience. Although here's a fun story. Rick and I met early on, like well before Gem. Mark Evanier founded a group called the Comics Art Professional Society, CAPS for short. And I had I think I had just sold my first comic book story at that point, so I was able to join the group. And that was where I got to know a bunch of really good people like Rick and Don Glut and Sergio Aragonis, Mark Evanier. I mean, just, you know, tons of really amazing people in the comic book field. And so one night at a party, you know, Rick and Don Glut and I and Roy Thomas were at this party, and Roy opened up the idea of us doing a what if story. And so Rick and Don and I went off into a corner, and we worked out all of the beats for this what if story. What if the Fantastic Four had different powers? Remember that, Rick? I'm sure you remember.
Oh yeah. That was my first big book at Marvel. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like a break for us, you know, and Rick and I got to know each other really well through comics, even before animation. So.
And we continued that relationship at Marvel, at the Marvel Animation Studios. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. We both ended up working at what was originally Patty Freeling and then became Marvel Productions, and working with Stan on the Marvel properties and all of that. So Rick and I have this wonderful history going back.
And what's your nickname for him, Christy?
Oh, I was just calling him Ricola, but I mean, that's just something I came up with.
Yeah.
he remembered.
There were other names probably called me along the way too.
As part of the special crossover edition, before we formally introduce Christy and start her session, I just wanted you, Christy, to talk about a little bit about, I think we were calling you in the previous session with Rick, we kind of said you were the showrunner, you were the creator, and you kind of ran the whole show. And how did your role in Gem relate to the stuff that Rick did?
Well, that's kind of ties into what I was saying before, is because we were all so separated in distance. And of course, you know, this is before the internet as we think of it today. I mean, there was an internet that existed, and thanks to Steve Gerber, I was actually submitting some scripts, and we were doing some communicating through the really early crude versions of what you would now think of as the internet. So we still had to pretty much do things either by phone, you know, talking by phone, or, you know, when things had to be sent, certain things had to be sent back and forth, they'd go by courier. So it wasn't the same kind of easy communication you have now, where everybody could just have texting or email or, you know, some really easy way to communicate. And so because everybody was pretty much spread out and at great distances, it was a bit, in the games business, we refer to it as being siloed, where people are working in their own little silo and things, but it was kind of like that. So I had little to no interaction at all with the art end of things, or, you know, I never saw storyboards, never had input on storyboards or anything like that. So unfortunately, you know, I would do the story development stuff and work with the writers, but once I turned a script in, that was pretty much it. That was pretty much the last time I saw anything.
That's good. It's good to understand that. And with that, I would love to thank Rick as our guest. First time at JemCon. I hope it was pleasant for you, Rick. The audience.
The blast.
Yeah, it was fun. Good. So audience online, audience in the room, please clap for Rick.
Thank you very much.
And you're free to enjoy the rest of your day, Rick. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be in touch. I'll send you that thing over email, that video you want to see.
Sounds great. I'd appreciate it. That'd be wonderful.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, feel free to stick around if you want, but
Yeah, feel free to hang on. Yeah.
I'm gonna take off anyway.
You probably had enough.
I have another duty. The dogs are calling me to get fed at this point, so I can hear them whining back there, you know?
My duty this morning, unfortunately, in addition to giving out pills and medicine to 7 cats and feeding 7 cats and cleaning cat boxes, I also had to give, today was cat bath day.
Oh boy.
Because Randy, my husband, is wildly allergic to cats. So the only way he can even survive in the house that has 7 cats in it is that every week, once a week, the cats get a quote bath with an anti-allergen liquid. And it neutralizes the allergen in their fur for about a week. And he can survive. Great. So that was my fun morning. Washing cats. I won't be able to match that.
Great. Thank you, Rick. And Christy,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
See y'all later. See you, Christy. Have a good one.
So Rachel, if you want to let people know that we're starting with Christy. Christy, if you're ready, we'll do the formal kind of kickoff for the creator of Gem, our mother of all the reason we're here today. We'll turn it over, but we'll make sure that people are aware that you're on, since we're kind of running right into the next one. Are you all scratched up from cat bath day? Like, do you have a lot of scratches on your arms? Do you wear certain things?
It was kind of a rushed one this morning. And of course, the cats are always thrilled about it. So.
Oh yeah, they like being clean though.
They don't like being wet.
So I think I'm going to be running this with help from others. We have a little setup in here that is different, but I know you're kind of self-sufficient, Christy. So this is going to be an easy job for me, and I'll let you just talk about things that you want to talk about. We've had Townsend Coleman here earlier. He was the speaking voice of Riot, the voice actor for Riot. So that was the first time we had him. We had Rick, and we have Samantha Newark here live and in person. I'm sure you know, right?
Oh, Sam is wonderful.
Yeah, she's great. So this kind of hybrid virtual JemCon, we still have 4 awesome guests, and we were so pleased to get you as our favorite guest, the guest that matters the most, arguably. So we have about 40 people in the room and about 33 people online. So that's your audience today. We are recording already. And yeah, what do you want to talk about today?
You asking me what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting when you mention the voice actors, of course, is that I never got to meet any of the voice actors until I started going to JemCon. That was where I got to meet them. So, you know, once again, when I was talking about everything being done in such separate places and over distances, I just never got to meet any of those people. And if it hadn't been for JemCon starting up and bringing the actors in, I never would have met them probably. So what we have, I don't know, do we just have questions? We could just start off with some questions or something?
Maybe do your preamble, like you kind of have a good script down of like how you got involved, how you got pulled in. For people who are brand new to this con and don't know
Yeah,
you, just give me
I
that
guess
5
so.
minute. Yeah,
I keep thinking that everybody's already heard all of this stuff like 100 times, but I suppose I shouldn't take that for granted. Well, let's see. So when I got into writing animation, starting with working at Marvel Productions with Stan on some things, I actually got to do a bit of development with him, and then we ended up doing the Spider-Man series that ran in 1981, 82, and I wrote a couple of those. And then we did Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And so I was into writing animation and then very much into comics, which I absolutely loved, comic book characters. And then I acquired an agent named Candy Montero, or I could say she acquired me, however you want to say it. And Candy was the first agent who was smart enough to think about representing animation writers. And because before that, animation writers, I think, were, well, first of all, we barely existed. And then secondly, we were not viewed as, you know, a valuable asset the way, say, a live action writer was. And she was the first person that was clever enough and smart enough to think about, hey, I could represent all of these animation writers. And so she had what we jokingly referred to as Candy's stable, you know, all of the writers that she represented. And she was the one that made the contact with Sunbow Productions, or probably Sunbow Productions came to LA looking for writers. And there was Candy representing all of these writers. And that was how I found myself writing for G.I. Joe. My story editor was Steve Gerber, and the biggest change that Steve Gerber brought to my life was that he was requiring the writers who wrote on G.I. Joe to use computers. So in order to fulfill my assignment to write this G.I. Joe script, I had to literally go out and buy a computer, which at the time was like a K-Pro 10, you know, had a whopping 10 megabyte hard drive, one of the first hard drives. And I had to buy this computer, learn how to use this computer, learn what software was and how it worked, and learn how to use a modem, which was dial-up at the time, like a 300 baud modem, how to use a modem to send the scripts. And so I had to make this enormous leap into technology just to write for G.I. Joe. So that was a big change in my life, but it turned out to be something that was extremely important later on, because later on I ended up designing computer games. So he was my mentor, my tech mentor, and a wonderful friend. And I ended up writing 5 G.I. Joe scripts. And of course, in the process of doing that, I got to know Joe Bacall and Tom Griffith, and became known to the people at Sunbow. And so one day they had a meeting and they said, we have a show that we would like to have you develop based on some dolls by Hasbro. And so they told me a little bit about this show and offered me some really nice money. And and so of course I said yes, but I walked out of there having come fresh from things like, you know, Spider-Man and G.I. Joe. And I remember walking out of the meeting thinking, boy, this is going to be really soft. I don't know if I even know how to write something that's this soft. But it turns out I did. Now, originally, this was not a half-hour series. So the first iteration of Jem and the Holograms was not Jem at all. It was just M, the letter M. And it was going to be 15 6-minute segments. And one Gem segment was going to run in the middle of this half-hour show that we called Super Saturday or Super Sunday, depending on, you know, which market it ran in. And there was a boys action piece, like a 6-minute boys action piece, then a Gem segment, and then another 6-minute boys action piece. So, you know, Gem sandwiched between these two boys action things. And so one of the instructions that I got was, yes, it has to be music and romance and fashion, but there has to be enough action that the boys don't change the dial, because that was their great fear, is that when Gem came on, the boys would turn the dial to something else, you know, literally. I mean, in those days, you didn't even have remotes. You had to go over and change the dial. So, you know, it was like, okay, we want action, but, you know, all this other stuff as well. And of course, it's a very different thing to structure 15 little segments. And if they became repackaged and repurposed once they decide to make it its own half-hour show. Those 15 little segments became the first 5 half-hour miniseries. And I'm sure for those of you who have watched that, you'll notice that pretty much every single act has a real cliffhanger. And that was because of the original structure of those little segments being sandwiched in these boys shows. That was why it ended up with such a strange kind of a structure to it. And the other thing was that when they decided to convert it to half hour, they discovered that each segment was just a little bit short on time. It didn't quite add up to the time needed, the 22 minutes needed of animation for a half an hour. And so I also had to go back and write like just little tiny sections of something that could then be added to fill it out to the necessary 22 minutes. So it was this whole process, rather interesting process. And of course, I should clarify that it isn't technically correct to call me the creator of Gem, because it was created by Bill Sanders, the toy guy that came up with the original concept. And, you know, he got together with a couple of other people and went and sold it to Hasbro. So, I mean, really, I need to credit him as the creator of the fundamental concept, the underlying concept that ended up becoming Gem. Although he did, I discover, originally design it to be a boy band and a boy property. And I think when they went to Hasbro, Hasbro was looking for something for a girl line probably, and that's how it ended up being converted into girl bands. And technically in the TV world, now we're talking live action, it's the animation, we don't have these rules because the animation isn't covered by the Writers Guild most of the time. You can get it now, coverage by the Writers Guild, but unfortunately, in general, animation, especially this type of animation, was not covered by the Writers Guild. But under basic rules, I would be considered the developer of the series. I was the person who developed it. So I took just basic underlying concepts. You know, here's a rock singer who has a secret identity, and she's got this band composed of, you know, these dolls, and she's got this computer called Synergy, and she, you know, she has these earrings, she can change how she looks, and she's got a boyfriend, and they're going to have this car. So like they had worked out the toy line, and they were still, all the time I was writing these 15 segments, they kept changing the names on me. You know, just about everybody's name changed. I think the only characters I think that didn't have their stage names changed were Pizzazz and Rio. And I think pretty much almost everybody else was going through name changes and instrument changes and things that were driving me crazy. And I had to beg and beg and beg Hasbro just to send me some Polaroids of the dolls so I could try to get some sense of what these characters even look like. But nonetheless, I wrote what's called a Bible, in which I created the essence of the show, you know, what their real identities and real names were, and what their personalities were, how they interacted with one another, what their relationships were. I came up with Eric Raymond, and named after my brother. I used my brother's name for the villain, and came up with the Starlight House and Starlight Music, and the fact that Jerica would be this music executive, and you know, all of that extra, all the extra stuff that to build the series around is what I came up with. And so then we launched into 65 half hours, which was a full run of syndication at the time. It was a standard run of syndication at the time.
And thank you for doing that. We're all here because of that, because you did that. I wonder what you think about the influence of this on people like us, kind of the children of Gem, the people who are attracted to Gem, a lot of the people who are involved in the creation of the concept, like Bill Sanders, and some of the voice actors, some of the people who wrote identify as female or are queer people. Do you think that somehow like is part of the Gem appeal to some of us, is that the creators were people who identify as female or people who are queer?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know. I really have no way of knowing. I mean, I never even knew about the existence of Bill Sanders until probably 20 years later. You know, so that information was never shared with me at the time. You know, there was not something they considered relevant. So I only found out about him like much, much later. But you know, it's an interesting thing, and it's something I've thought about quite a lot. Why does Gem have this particular appeal? And I think it just has a lot to do with the fact that so much of Gem deals with trying to figure out one's identity. You know, trying to figure out who you really are, switching between identities, being afraid of having your, you know, this secret found out. And of course, you know, talking about the 80s when it was, you know, much different time period for someone to be gay, queer, whatever, you know, to try and come out, much more difficult kind of a thing. And so I think that whole searching for identity, searching for who you are, feeling like you have a secret you have to keep, I think all of that translates pretty well into a lot of people's experience.
Yeah, queer or otherwise, really, it's not just a queer thing, right? It's a human thing, and all this kind of the alchemy of all that stuff together, along with the kindness and the altruism that the bands, you know, there was always a twist of that, even with the Misfits, that something that they had heart, you know. And so I love that. Tell me about, you write for computer games. Have you ever thought about writing a Gem computer game using those characters and putting them into a computer world and letting us play with them there?
Yeah, I certainly toyed with the possibility of doing that, but you know, I would have had to work out or get the rights from Hasbro, and Hasbro, frankly, over the years, never wanted anything to do with me. It was very difficult trying to ever deal with them, so I couldn't think about it very seriously just because of that.
Just create new awesome characters for your games, right?
I'm sorry?
Create new awesome characters for your games. Just go start with a clean slate, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, creating even creating a game, a mobile game is a very complicated process. It's certainly not something I could do by myself. It would require an entire team. So I would have had to go to some company. I mean, I worked at Zynga for 6 years working on first Facebook games and then mobile games. Now, those things are utterly complex, and you'd be surprised at how many people it takes to churn one of those things out, especially since they work on a very tight time schedule. They're the kind of thing where you continuously have to put out new content, and that means you've got teams churning behind the scene to turn out new content. You know, so I would have had to have some kind of backing. I would have needed a company or a team or somebody like that. And just because I knew that it was very hard to deal with Hasbro, I just never seemed like it was enough of could make enough of an effort.
Oh, that makes sense. I think you may have heard the X-Men thing. They were talking about X-Men 97 and then bringing the X-Men back with the same story writers and the same voice actors.
Awesome. That's just amazing. Yeah.
And if for some reason, if Hasbro approached you or whoever the right people were approached you to be part of something, or we pick up Gem where she left off, the day after Bunny is adopted back by her father, would you do it?
Would I do it?
Yeah.
Did you say, oh, yeah, of course I would do it.
And what, do you have any ideas about where you would pick it up right there?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, that episode was written, I wrote it after we knew that they weren't going to do any more Gem. We'd been told that they decided to cancel it at that point. So that was it was a farewell. It was my own personal heartfelt farewell to the show and the series and to the fans. And so I didn't really think beyond that, to tell you the truth. I did, some years later, I did approach Hasbro with a concept and a way to reboot Gem and bring it back and continue it, but they just were not interested.
Yeah, it was that episode, just, you know, I don't know if I've told you this before, but it was such a lovely episode to all of us. It was such a lovely way to end. It was surprising to someone who was 8 and didn't know the show was ending, that suddenly this seemed like a very obvious end to something that we loved. It seemed like she was saying farewell, and we don't know what's going on in the industry, and there's nothing in the papers about Gem ending, but it's very shocking to an 8-year-old that a show that you love it looks like it's about to be over. But it was very lovingly done, and a lot of us had a hard time watching that episode. Like, you don't want it to be over again. So when you're rewatching episodes, that one kind of stays in its own box, its own place on the side, because it's too emotional to watch. So thank you for all the love you put into that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the pandemic, the ongoing endemic pandemic that we're in. We're finally together again, somewhat virtually and somewhat hybrid. What have you learned about yourself in the last couple of years? What has been different? What's the same? And, you know, what have you learned about your work and your business and your life, as far as priorities and what you want to do and what we should be doing?
Well, I'm afraid that even before the pandemic, my life underwent an extremely drastic and dramatic change in that Randy and I had our home destroyed in the campfire in November of 2018. We woke up realizing that something was seriously wrong, and we lived in the town of Magalia, which was just north of the town of Paradise that got completely wiped out by the fire, and 84 people got killed. But we got an evacuation notice, a red alert evacuation notice. So we had to very hastily cram 6 cats into 6 cat carriers into the car, grab a few clothes, grab a few vital papers, and join hundreds of other people clogging this tiny mountain road, which was the only way to escape. And literally, you know, a drive that usually took maybe 40 minutes took 6 hours of creeping down the road and looking off and seeing the entire ridge going up in flames. And it was a few days, you know, we had to live in hotels. And then after a week or so, we discovered that our house was reduced to nothing but ashes. So all of my original scripts, all the paper copies of my scripts, all of my early scripts and materials, all of my mementos, all of my correspondence, you know, everything we had in the world was gone. You know, books, games, trophies, memorabilia, everything just utterly destroyed. And we went back and looked through the ashes at one point, and the only thing that survived that fire were a couple of ceramic objects that could undergo that kind of high temperature firing. So we basically lost a year of our lives because we were homeless. You know, we lived in hotels. We finally got into a little tiny apartment, and we had absolutely nothing. I mean, we had to start from complete zero with every possession that you can think of. And finally, eventually, our cats had to be boarded for like 8 months, which was not fun. And we did finally get another house, moved into another mountain town. For some reason, we just like mountain towns, and tried to rebuild our lives, just starting over again. And then the pandemic hit. So, you know, we were like just barely getting back on our feet. I mean, just barely. And then the pandemic hits. And but more than the pandemic, that fire, that losing every single personal object, every single physical, pretty much every single physical thing you ever had, radically changed my feeling towards having physical possessions to the point where I kind of don't want to have anything now. You know, we have obviously acquired stuff, things that we absolutely have to have, and some clothing and, you know, a few nice little knickknacks, but it's just radically changed my entire life outlook towards physical possessions because it can all be gone in a split second. And just we tried to keep things as simple as possible, as light as possible in terms of not getting bogged down with tons of stuff, because I had tons and tons of stuff. I had, you know, hundreds if not thousands of comic books, yeah, probably thousands of comic books and all the books that we had collected over the years. The one lucky thing is that back in 2017, when we moved to Magalia, I sold 12 boxes of all of my toys and action figures to the Strong Museum of Play in New York. And that included the original Jem doll that my mother bought for me back when the series went on the air. And another Jem doll that I think that a fan gave me that was a, you know, special doll. And all the other shows I worked on, you know, Conan and Mighty Max, all the other little shows. I had like a whole bunch of different kinds of action figures and action toys and memorabilia. So they acquired all of that. So if I had not sold that stuff to the museum for a collection, that would have all been destroyed too. So that was actually kind of a lucky thing that happened. And hopefully one day they'll have it all up together as a Christy Marx collection. But I was also going to bequeath them all those papers, all those original paper scripts, all the stuff that was written for computer onto, you know, just when there's nothing but paper copies. And unfortunately, I can't do that anymore. But so that event coupled with the pandemic, we just live like hermits. It's pretty quiet. We spend most of our time taking care of the cats. But it definitely has had a major effect on how we feel about life, how we feel about acquiring things, about what's important to us, you know, where we want to spend our time, what we want to spend our time doing. I am more focused on just working on the things that I personally want to work on and care about, rather than I've had an astounding number of job offers, especially in computer games, and pretty much I've turned them all down because I just want to stay focused on doing something of my own. I get some writing done on the, still want to get the Jem memoir done, and you know, have some other things, start writing some books, which I haven't done before. Where I've done a few short comic book stories for Interpop, which is a digital comic book company, a brand new one. The woman who was my editor at DC Comics became the editor-in-chief of Interpop, and so through her, I've been writing a few short stories for them. Some of those, I think they're mostly free to read. If you go to the Interpop website, you should be able to find them.
That's a great tip. Thanks, Christy. Yeah, and all that stuff. Yeah, the fact that you have your life, and you know that you can recalibrate your life is the most important thing, right? Imagine that you didn't make it out there with you and your cats and your partner. So that recalibration, it's just good to hear that you've been able to do that through that horrible circumstance.
Yeah, it's really not easy. It's not easy, that weird sense of being disconnected and having nothing and starting over, and it is definitely a strange thing to deal with.
I think the Jem Bible was part of that, but you had copies out there. People kind of gave them back to you, right? You have a version of that still now because you had sold those to fans before. Fortunately,
I had digitized the Jem Bible and all of the Jem scripts, or almost all of them anyway, a long time ago, many years back, because people started wanting to buy copies of the scripts, and originally I was literally just photocopying the original hard copy, and it was starting to destroy the original paper version. So I ended up scanning all of that material. So because of that, I still have at least digital copies.
That's good to hear. Nothing, we haven't lost like something like that that's that important. I was going to ask you a couple.
I did just recently reacquire copies of 2 of my Spider-Man and His Amazing Friend scripts from a fan, because I had lost those in the fire, and I didn't think I'd ever have a chance of getting those back again. And just by sheer accident, a few weeks ago, this fan got in touch with me and about something relating to Spider-Man, and it turned out that he had purchased copies of these scripts. It must have been like just ages and ages ago, and he still had these very nice pristine photocopies of these 2 of these scripts that I had completely lost, and he very kindly sent them to me.
That's awesome. Good fans.
Yeah, yeah.
It goes to my next question, actually, and I want people to start thinking on the Zoom and in the room if they have questions for you as well. But what do you find as a common thread or common themes that among your fans, as far as Jem fans or just Christy Marx fans generally?
A common theme. They're all good people. That's the one thing. I have kind of a splintered fandom in general, because I have people who are Jem fans or who are Spider-Man fans, G.I. Joe fans, Transformer fans, but then I also have people who are fans of the video game work, or fans of the live action TV work, fans of the comics I've done. So it's a little bit splintered, but in general, and especially Jem fans, just a bunch of really good people who I think carried forward the positive messages that were in Jem. And it seems to divide amongst people who were inspired to go into some creative field because of Jem, whether it's music or fashion or whatever it is, and people who were helped through a difficult part of their lives because of Jem. I hear that a lot from people who was like, Jem really helped them survive or somehow get through a very difficult part of their lives. And so I think it helped on a number of different levels.
Yeah, and I think some people are in both camps. Even like, I think personally, I think of that for myself. It was helped me through a difficult part of my life, but it also inspires a lot of what I do with art, and what I think is fun, what I think is cool, is all related back to Jem somehow and to the 80s and that stuff. So thank you for that time capsule.
I've told this story before, but when we ran the 2-part episode that dealt with the runaway kids, when I wrote that, I refused to just give it some kind of a sappy, happy ending. I didn't want to sell out by doing that. I felt that the more important message in those episodes were that if you do need to run away, if you do need to get from a bad situation, get help, go to someone who can help you. And unbeknownst to me, they ran a hotline number for runaway kids. They ran a number that kids could call, and they were just flooded. They were buried with phone calls. I didn't know that they were going to do that, but their helpline just was absolutely flooded with calls from kids. And so even at the time, it was having an impact. It was making a difference.
Did you write those PSAs that were part of the episode sometimes?
I did write I was hired to write the little PSAs. Yeah, I didn't come up with the tagline. That was something that they had. Here's the tagline, and here's what we want each little one of these things to be about, and then they handed those off to me to write.
Great. Yeah, that's part of that charitable work. Part of that. I mean, they were real things too at the time. They were real problems that we were dealing with.
Well, you know why they did those is because back at the time there were these do-gooder crusaders who thought that children's animation was not good for kids, and that we were just doing half-hour toy commercials, and they were accusing of us all of this kind of stuff. And so there was some legislation that got passed, and as the legislation wanted to sharply define what was the show versus what was a commercial, which is why we ended up with what we call bumpers, those little we'll be back to Jem in 30 seconds, those little bumpers that happen when you end an act and when you begin an act. Those were happening because of this legislation. And the PSAs were a way of trying to make animation look good, basically. You know, it was, a lot of shows were doing it. He-Man at the time, you may remember, they actually had moral of the story at the end. They like just hit you over the head with, and now the moral of the story is, and that was just because of this legislation and because of the attitude towards animation at the time.
Oh, thanks for that. I forgot that context about it. These Crusaders. Tell us about the Jem movie. You were in the Jem movie. You were Lindsay Pierce. You were gifted a doll by Davide of you as Lindsay Pierce. But tell us about that experience, being part of that, being asked to be part of it, what it's like being on the set, and your part specifically.
Yeah, that did not start out as a very happy experience for me, because I was working at Zynga at the time, still at Zynga, and I suddenly get a phone call from someone at Hasbro, someone who's in the like global PR department or something like that, and she said, well, we just wanted to give you a heads up that there's going to be an announcement about a Jem movie. And I said, me being me, I said, oh, a Jem movie, great. I hope you're going to let me write it. And there's like this pause. Like, well, no, the movie is about to be made. And so basically, they just blindsided me with something that was a done deal that I knew nothing about. And I obviously wasn't very happy about that. And then they said, well, the director, John Chu, would really like to talk to you. Is that all right? And I said, yeah, sure, fine. Yeah, he can call me. And so I ended up talking to him, and I found out the script was fully written and they were ready to go into production. They were just about to start shooting. And so, we had a nice enough conversation, but I couldn't come away very happy from a situation like that, where I had no involvement and was not consulted ahead of time, and was written by somebody who I really don't think understood Jem very well. And I did end up liking John, however. John was very sincere and very passionate about what he was doing. He flew me down to LA. He showed me his whole pitch and presentation that he had gone through to sell the idea to Hasbro. And I ended up liking him a lot. And I thought he was very genuine in what he was trying to do. And because I really liked him a lot, and because I just love being on sets, when he asked me to do a cameo, I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I used to work, when I began my career, I worked in television production, in the production end of things. And so I was like a production secretary, and I was a liaison between producers and productions. And so I did get to spend quite a lot of time on sets, and it's just a favorite thing of mine. I absolutely love being on sets. To me, I love the energy of sets, well, happy sets. There are unhappy sets and there are happy sets, but happy productive sets are just a really fun, wonderful place to be. During the shooting of Babylon 5, I was there while they were shooting the pilot, and I was there when they were shooting my episode, and just enjoy the energy. I enjoy being around those kind of people, I'm not just talking about the actors and directors, I'm just talking about the crew, all the wonderful people that make a show work, because it's like a family. Everybody comes, if it's gelling well, they all come together like a family. Everybody knows their job. It's just got a lot of energy, and it's just a great place to be. So I was there just for one night, and John did send me some dialogue ahead of time. And I felt that it was, and I said to him, it felt like we were kind of beating people over the head with a 2x4. I thought it was kind of heavy-handed dialogue. I said, do you mind if I rewrite it? And he was like, oh, no, please go right ahead, whatever you want to do. So, so I did. And the thing about the dialogue, what it told me was that they didn't really understand what Jem was about. And I think that's what the movie suffered from the most, is they did not really understand what Jem was about, and nobody at Hasbro understood back then, and that's part of the problem that was behind it. The other part of the problem, of course, is that they only had $5 million to make this with, so we're talking like the smallest conceivable budget you could have, because Hasbro certainly didn't want to put any money into it, so they did the best they could with what they had. But I just felt that they made some very serious mistakes in in the script and how they approached the setup and how they approached the characters. And I felt it just did not represent Jem. It was like they made the Justin Bieber movie about a girl, you know, instead of making Jem. So.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. I think the girl properties, they put a lot of money into these boy properties like G.I. Joe and Transformers. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into it, and they could only put aside $5 million for Jem. It's kind of crazy, right?
Well,
But also,
they didn't really want to do it. I mean, John Chu he told me he spent years and years. I forget how many years. I think he said something like 8 years.
Yeah.
Trying to talk Hasbro into letting him do something, and I think the only reason they agreed is because Blumhouse agreed to put up this small amount of money, and so what do they have to lose, I guess, was the attitude.
Right. Well, and you ended up writing some for the movie, at least your own lines you got to rewrite, right?
Yeah, well, at least that, yeah.
And they did that weird thing with fans too. They told us that we could like submit videos and that we could write the movie and that we could, but it was all done by the time they involved us. So we didn't get quite as, sideswiped as you did, but it was the same kind of thing they did with the fans. It was kind of like a afterthought, and it was very obviously an afterthought. So it felt like a slap in the face, I think, too, from that perspective. So anyway, a better subject. What's your favorite JemCon memory? I know you've been to a few JemCons. Tell us some of your favorite memories from JemCon.
You're talking to a person that doesn't have a great memory. I really don't. I really not a person with a great memory. I mean, things that stand out were the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in Cleveland. That was just really awesome getting to do that and being there and talking to people there and the little Jem display that they had up. I mean, that was very, very cool. And I just had a spectacular time going to Rotterdam. And had so
a lot of clapping.
So much
Stefan's
fun.
Here, the Cleveland crowd's here. Stefan's here. There's a lot of clapping.
Yeah, I mean, I just had so much fun doing that, and I love to travel. And here's a chance for me to see a country I'd never been to, and be taken around and treated to all of these wonderful sites, and smoke some nice dope, and and I had a really spectacular time. And some of the cosplay is always fun. I mean, the cosplay is always just amazing, and people do really amazing things with the cosplay. And I loved the one year that we had a bearded Jem as our winner. He had this awesome costume and these spectacular legs and a beard, and he just looked great though. I made a great Jem, and just a lot of fun with the cosplay. That's always something I've enjoyed. And getting to meet actors, getting to meet the voice actors, and getting to meet people that worked at Hasbro, and getting to meet these people that I never got to interact with before, has always been a highlight too.
Yeah, they've all been cool. All of our guests have always been really cool, I think, too. And they all are same vibe somehow. There's some kind of similar frequency we all operate on. So I love that part about it. Anyone on the internet or in the room want to ask Christy a question? Now's the time.
And I have to say too, that one of the things that really struck me, because when I first started going to JemCons, there were like maybe 100 people would show up. But one of the things that has struck me every time I've gone is just been the warmth and the love and the emotion from the fans, from the people that show up. That's just always been spectacular.
And we have new people too. I think that's great that younger people are here every time. We have new people, so it's not the same 100 people or whatever.
It keeps. That's the other thing that's really been amazing to me over the years is I keep hearing from people who are introducing Jem to their kids, or I hear from, say, a 16-year-old who just discovered it through YouTube or something like that. And even though it's aged and obviously the music's outdated, the fashions are outdated, the tech is outdated, but the stories still work. The characters still work, and that's the power of story. It's not just about the music or the fashion or what kind of technology they have, but it's about the characters what the characters mean to one another, what the characters mean to us, what the stories have to say to us. And obviously it's still working, because I'm hearing all the time about kids who are discovering it and still love it.
Yeah, it transcends the era in which it was represented and made. That story really does help it do that, and the vibe and the energy. So, Amy, I see you're first.
Yep. Hey, thank you so much.
Hi,
So
Amy.
much for coming back and coming back and coming into the panel with us. There's a question about the Misfits. We have an origin story for the holograms, obviously, like how they come together. That is the core. And then later on, we get the origin of the Stingers, because we have the whole music video with "It's a Hard, Hard Life." Yeah, "It's a Hard, Hard Life," and then Riot's Hope, obviously. But the Misfits, they just kind of like they're kind of like the bad girls, and they're the opposition for the holograms. But do we get like a real, like, how did they form? What happened to bring these three together?
That's a really good point. And I have never actually thought about an origin story for the Misfits because it was never needed. It was like, again, remember that where we're dealing with these 15 6-minute segments. And the reason things are just jammed in there up front is because I didn't have time to do anything else. I didn't have time to try and, I didn't even have a half an hour to try to develop out this stuff. I just had to like jam as much as I could into it, like right up front. And so there really wasn't time to sit back and think, oh, gee, how did the Misfits can I show anything about how no, because they weren't the focus, obviously Jerica and Jem and those characters, were the focus. And so it was just like they existed. The Misfits existed. They were already there. They were already a group. They were just ready to go. And I never really had to worry about where they came from. Never really came up as an issue. So I never really, I didn't take the time to think about it because I didn't need to. It wasn't a priority.
Okay. I think that's really cool. And technically it wasn't my question. It was from one of my friends in Discord, and I was like, I can ask that question.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay.
That's an awesome question. So I think that's really cool that you hadn't thought about it, but okay. I like it. I feel like it. Thank you so much. And the dynamic between those three characters, the three main girls, because you have Stormer, who's kind of the soft-hearted one, Roxy, she's just rough and tough, and like Pizzazz is number 2. And I like the way they interact, and they are a family, which I think is a really big theme with Jem and the Holograms, period. There's different ways to form a family. It's not always blood. And so when you come to the Misfits, there's this idea that like they're so different, but at the end of the day, they're like this. Like you're not gonna like, I don't know, you're not gonna come between them too hard. But thank you so much for that.
All right.
Thanks, Amy. I think that's a good idea for a fan fiction contest next year, maybe the Misfits origin story. Next up, we have LM on Zoom with a question.
Hello, Christy.
Hello there.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, of all the Jem episodes you've written, which one are you most proud of?
I'm proud of. I guess it would kind of be a tie between the awards one and that's a toughie. That's like, who's your favorite child? I really liked what we did with the music awards. But I also really liked a lot of the stuff we did with the talent search, and I also loved the very last episode.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I guess proud of it be the music awards.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, LM. Where are you calling from?
Scotland in the United Kingdom.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
Good to see
you.
you.
Thanks, Christy.
Next question is a Zoom question, and we have one in the room. Christian Wright, you're next.
Well, yeah. Given the confirmed ties between Jem and the original G.I. Joe series, Who do you think that either Eric Raymond or Tech Rat were working for Cobra?
No, I never really saw any connection between those two universes.
Well, put that one on the list, Mr. Watson, for the paint lines.
But that's because remember that in both animation and especially in toy development, boy toys and girl toys never meet. I mean, nowadays maybe it may be a little bit changed, but back then when we talk about silos, there was, girl toys are in their own silo, boy toys are in their own silo, and they did not interact, period. That was just not how toy companies work. All right, so let's see. Okay, you said you.
Okay, sorry.
Question somebody there?
Yeah, it's free.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ellie.
Hi there.
My question is, I wanted to know if you could remember any situation where Hasbro told you, or they had a toy or a concept that they said you need to work into the show, and your first reaction was, how in the world am I going to do this?
Well, that was my first reaction to the entire concept of the series, but not any particular character or anything. No, I mean, it was a little bit weird in that they wanted me to introduce the Rockin' Roadster right up front. And so I had to just like jam this Roadster into a scene where it made no sense at all. But, for toy purposes, it had to be there. So I had to do that, but it was just part of the challenge of doing a show like that. And I certainly didn't have any trouble with new dolls that they wanted to turn into characters or anything like that. That was all just fun to do. Let's see. The one thing where I kind of bumped up against a problem was when I created the character of Tech Rat. And my original take on Tech Rat is that he was androgynous and that we wouldn't know for sure whether this person was male or female. I wanted it to be kind of a mystery, have this very androgynous kind of character, and they just could not cope with that at all. So Tech Rat had to be male.
Thank you very much.
Allie was our fan fiction contest winner, so she had a bunch of concepts to cram into a fan fiction. So she's asking partially as a fellow writer.
That's the reaction I had when they gave me the list of requirements for the story.
Oh, okay. And of course, there was one character I developed named Graphics that I never got to even write anything for. I mean, I never even got to use her in anything because I think they dropped the doll from the doll line or something. So I never got to do anything with her. Hello.
Hi, Christy. Good afternoon. It's always such a treat to have you here at JemCon.
Thank you.
I was going to ask what gives you hope as we discover a new generation finding the universal appeal of Gem.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard all of that. So what?
She's asking about what's giving you hope about the new crowd of people, the young people finding Gem, like why that's good.
Why I think that's good is because I think that Gem, I think one of the important things about Gem is that it was full of positive messages. You had characters that behaved in ethical ways and characters that didn't, and there were shades of gray. It wasn't just black and white, but Gem throughout was supposed to have positive messages, and I think it did. And I think the fact that it's still communicating to so many kids and new generations just indicates that those messages are still valid, and those messages are still getting across and still getting out there, and a younger generation is responding to those messages. And I think that's very important and very hopeful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. Interesting. One more in the room.
Hi there.
Hey there.
Hi, so I've been watching Gem since I was a little kid. It was my first introduction to punk music and the cool music scene. And even when I was a little kid, I was like, wow, this show is pretty hardcore. You know, the misfits are running around committing crimes and, you know, there's really cool bands and there's, you know, all kinds of extortion and blackmail and things going on. And then when I turned 18, I started booking bands for a punk club and went back and watched Gem. And I was like, wow, this show is a lot more hardcore than I really even remembered it being. And so my question to you is, what didn't you get away with? Was there something that they said no to?
There was something they said no to. I wrote an outline for an episode I really wanted to do about a boy having to deal with an alcoholic father. And I really wanted to deal with that issue of, you know, how alcoholism affects a kid. You know, I wasn't, you know, and I had worked out the whole storyline for it, and they just felt it was too, I'm not sure, too something, just too much. They didn't really want to have to deal with. For some reason, it was okay to deal with a drug issue where drugs are bad, and yet for some reason they didn't want to deal with alcoholism. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. They said to me if I wanted to really soften it up, you know, or lighten up what I was trying to tell, and I said, what's the point? You know, if I can't tell the story I want to tell, there's not any point. So just ended up not doing it.
Oh, thank you so much for answering my question. Appreciate you being here.
I have some visitors who want to say hi to you. These guys.
Hey, two of my favorite people. Hello. I wish I could be there to hug you guys.
Yeah, we miss you. We miss you a lot. Yeah.
You're dressed very conservatively there. I don't know. Except for the shoes.
I also have a question for you. As you had to write storylines with the play sets, like the Rock and Roads, the Indoor Roads, the KGM studio, did they ever ask you to write a story about the waterbed?
About what?
The waterbed, that there was a new wave waterbed.
There was a waterbed?
Yes, the waterbed.
I never heard of this. You're kidding me. There seriously was a place with a waterbed, because I have never heard of this. And I never saw it in any of the stuff they sent me. I never saw anything about that. That would have been hysterical.
That's your keyboard, yeah. That's your question.
Yeah.
I had a waterbed once.
Great. Thank you, guys. We're going to go back to the internet. Phil, if you have a question, come off mute.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
There.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy. I'm Zooming from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to personally thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for just writing these wonderful characters. And I've been a fan of Gem, Transformers, and G.I. Joe. And really, I just really enjoyed, especially those two-parter episodes where you got the chance to really delve into the characters. And my question is, after you wrote an episode and then handed it off to Sunbow, did you have any control over what happened after? Like once it reached Wally Burr and the recording sessions, were you ever at any of the recording sessions to kind of keep an eye on what Wally's vision was, or after you had written the stories, was it pretty much out of your control and then it was handed off to Wally?
Yeah, once the script left my hands, that was it. That was the end of my interaction with it. I don't know if you were on earlier or not, but I talked a bit about how we were all very spread out geographically. And I did you hear any of that, or did you come in just at the beginning of?
I joined a little bit late.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'll go back over it just a little bit in case other people also weren't there. But basically, during production, we're all very spread out geographically. I mean, Sunbow was in New York. So, you know, the people that work for Sunbow were in New York, and a lot of the music and so forth, I think, was done in New York. And then I lived in this little mountain town that was about an 1.5-hour drive to get from where I lived down to LA. And then the studios down in LA where the storyboard people were, and were, you know, maybe I forget where they even did the voice work. So I was isolated from everybody else. I was dealing with writers mostly on the phone, or maybe a little bit through some computer communication, but we didn't have email, but it was all separate. So I would turn in a script, and that was the end of it. That was pretty much the last I would see of it. And you know, I didn't interact with any of the actors or any of the storyboard people or any of the production people at all. I pretty much did everything by phone, you know, phone or actual mail or courier or something like that.
I just find it's fascinating because at an earlier session, Samantha alluded to what's the secret sauce, and there are just so many different elements. And of course, it all stems from the writer, because you're faced with a blank page, and without the writer, there's nothing. There's no story, there's no character, there's no nothing. So again, thank you so much for starting it. And
that's
then,
true. That's true.
Yeah.
It is true that it does start there, you know, but without all of these other amazing talents, it also just ends there, and it's just words on a page. And I think one of the magic things about Gem is that it was just an amazing confluence of talent, all different kinds of talents. You know, all of the writers that we had, all of the people that were doing the art and the design, and the people that did the voices, and the people that did the music. And it was just an amazing, probably once in a lifetime coming together of all of these talents in a way that just worked, just absolutely worked.
I agree. I find it fascinating. Thank you again.
Thank you, Philip. We have another question in the room. Somebody you may recognize, Christy.
Hello.
I have a question. I wonder what was the origin of Gem from Jericho's point of view. There's no mention, of course, in the first episode it was cramped for time, but later on it would be fun. Have been fun that either Jericho wanted to be a rock star when she was young, and then maybe that their father had the nickname Gem, something like that. So I just wonder if you thought about something, because at the end they say, I have an idea, when after she met Synergy, and then pop, we have Gem. Of course, I think Gems appeared because Jericho wouldn't be involved doing the contest with the Misfits, and also be the 50% owner of Starlight Music. I think to avoid some kind of conflict, she had to be two separate characters. But it's just between she met Synergy and I have an idea, and then pop, Gem arrives. Of course, the first episodes were crammed and it's quite okay. But maybe later on, it would have been fun to say, well, when I grow up, I want to be a superstar. And maybe his father said, well, my little Gem, one day will maybe happen. It's more a reflection that I think that the question, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, when I was writing all of those initial segments, she wasn't called Gem. I mean, you know, she wasn't called Jerica. She started out as M, just the letter M, and the character's first name was, trying to remember the sequence. She was Misty, and then she was Morgan, and then finally I was like partway through writing these when the word came down, well, we can't trademark the letter M, or the letter M doesn't work for some reason. So now she's called Gem, and I'm like, oh, but that's not as good as M. You know, M could stand for music and mystery and, you know, all this. Like, no, it's got to be Gem, and she's now called Jerica. Or no, I think she had some other name first that started with J, but anyway. And then eventually she ended up being Jerica. So when I was initially putting everything together and thinking about the whole series up front, I didn't think about Jem. You know, why was she called Jem, or where would the name Jem have come from? Because it wasn't really a part of my initial thinking. And it was something that was introduced very suddenly later in the process. So I didn't really have time to sit back and think about that, you know, try to come up with anything for that. It was, you know, it was too far along in trying to get the stuff done. And it was just thrown at me kind of last minute. Now there was one episode called Out of the Past, which was, though not written by me, I ended up working because it dealt so much with the childhood of Jerica that I ended up working very, very closely with the writer on that, and did some rewriting on it myself. And we delved a little bit into what made her the kind of person she was, and, you know, a little bit more about the parents and that background and so forth. But, you know, it wasn't something I thought about up front, so it never really came up again later on.
Well, that's fine, and I really appreciate what you've done with the series. And of course, like you said, it was a whole team, a very once in a lifetime cooperation. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
One more person who wants to say hi to you, Christy, over here. Raven.
Hello.
In our cosplay.
Yes, just as always, we are so thrilled to have you with us, and it's exciting to be here. Exciting to have you, and I just wanted to say hi.
Hello.
And you can see the crowd, Christy here. Everyone say hi, be quiet.
Look at all them people. Hello.
Beautiful people. And I have one more question online. I'm going to close it out and give Christy her time back. So Carlos, you have the last question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi there. So
Good
where
evening.
are you
Good-
calling from?
Good evening from Portugal, Europe.
Portugal, all right. Man, we got Scotland, Portugal, we got Netherlands represented. We're going here.
The entire world. Christy, thank you so much for your work on Jam. I am a Portuguese independent musician, and I believe watching Jam since I was a kid was really, really important to make me believe I could pursue such a difficult and challenging professional life.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, I have a question connected to the music in the show. I don't know exactly your involvement in the music, but of course, you said a little ago that, well, all the elements and all the really talented people working in every aspect of Jam made it what it is. That is truly outrageous until today. And some of the elements that I think that were more important to me is the sensitivity, the emotions, and also the fact that there's a family where the music is present in the family, like Jerica and Kimber. And because I always sing with my sister, my grandfather used to play the traditional Portuguese guitar from Fado. It's our traditional music from Portugal. So I believe what connected the most in my heart watching Jam was this thing about music being a really positive side of conveying emotions in a happy family, you know. And I even today I always try to think what's that little thing most special about Jam for myself, and I believe that it's that. So my question is, what's your involvement, if any, in the music part? You could give some ideas for the music videos or for the lyrics. That's my question. Once again, thank you so much, and a big hi to everyone. Okay.
Yeah, the way it worked was that as I wrote the scripts, I would put in a paragraph that was like, you know, music video here. Here's what I want it to be about. I might give like a little bit of an idea for things that could be that not that I was trying to write lyrics, but just thoughts and ideas that a lot of times got turned into lyrics, and what I wanted, a rough idea of what I wanted the visuals to be. I didn't like going to like an excessive amount of detail, but just enough to give the storyboard artist a sense of what kind of visuals should be on the screen, and enough to give the people who are writing the lyrics and the songs a sense of what was the song about, what was the, you know, what kind of ideas or thoughts or emotions, you know, did I want to get across. So that usually was like a chunky paragraph within the script.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for being part of this. It's been great, Christy. Always great to have you. You are the creator, you know, ish, and I know you're correcting me on that, but
creator-ish, I like that.
Ish,
Creator-ish, developer,
and yeah,
whatever.
and the person who gives us all this love for JemCon and helps us keep together. So thank you for being with us once again. We'll hope to see you again soon, maybe in person one day. And we all love you very much.
Yeah, I hope so. I really want to get back to being able to interact with people, you know, one-on-one, because I love that.
Thank you again. Claps.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Christy. We love you.
Take care, everybody.